Thank you. The first item we have tonight is approval of our agenda. For just a brief note for our board, our agenda as it's prepared tonight, you'll notice there is no section for public forum. I've been evaluating our public forum and the challenges, and I don't know that public forum during our board meeting is meeting the needs that many of the folks who are coming to speak and address the board want. They want the opportunity to have dialogue and those things, and that doesn't really fit the format of our meeting. So I've been working with staff to arrange a time where we can have a setting that would more fit those needs, and we will have that announced probably by the 25th of March, okay? So also during tonight's meeting, I don't plan for us to take public comment on any action items or discussion items of agenda. With that, I would ask for a motion regarding the agenda that's been presented.
Mr. President, we do need an addendum to the personnel report.
Correct. I'm sorry. There is also an addendum at your seat that would be part of the agenda.
Mr. President, I move we accept the agenda with the amendment of the personnel agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Bandre. We have a motion.
Second.
Ms. Zimmerman seconds. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. First thing we will move into is recognitions and presentations with Ms. Kamian.
Good evening. We'll start with the You Make a Difference Awards this evening. The You Make a Difference Award is presented to staff members whose exemplary actions support students, colleagues, and the mission of Salina Public Schools. Recipients of these awards receive a lapel pin and a handwritten note personally delivered by a Board of Education member. Melanie Isaacson, Human Resources Specialist in the district office. Melanie's drive and creativity were demonstrated when she took over the substitute hiring process. She created a weekly orientation training program and a new sub spotlight that notifies buildings about new subs who are ready to start. Her efforts to increase efficiency and responsiveness in the HR department are making a difference. Thank you, Melanie. Jolene Peterson, district math coach in the district office. Jolene does a great job of making sure teachers have what they need to be successful. She always has a positive attitude with her work and enjoys finding new ways for students to become more successful in math. She has taken on different tasks throughout the year and always dives in with enthusiasm. Thank you, Jolene, for making a difference. Delia Velasquez-Pham, paraeducator, Lakewood Middle School. As a valuable part of the intensive reading team, Delia listens carefully to students, prompts their thinking, and assists and supports understanding. She attends PLCs and shares her notes and observations about student progress to assist the planning process. To be better prepared to support her students, she reads lessons and books at home. Thank you, Delia, for making a difference. Leanna White, paraeducator at South High School. Leanna is always walking around the classroom and checking on students. She reads and prepares for class on her own time. Her reflections on the lessons and collaborative nature help improve curriculum to better serve students. Always prepared with notes, lesson copies, seating charts, and more, she is ready to help instruct, coach, or assist students. Thank you, Leanna, for making a difference. Janelle Stelter, special education teacher at Coronado Elementary. Janelle joined Coronado this year as a part of the special education restructuring. She maintains a positive outlook and has tackled any challenges that came her way. Changed schedules and staffing challenges did not deter her from her goal of meeting her students' needs. Her love for her students and solid relationships with each of them is a constant. Thank you, Janelle, for making a difference. And tonight we celebrate our Teachers of the Year. First, I am pleased to introduce our Elementary Teacher of the Year, Tina Layton, fourth grade teacher at Meadowlark Ridge Elementary School. Tina, I would like to invite you to speak at the podium.
Hi. I would like to start out by thanking the wonderful people from Meadowlark Elementary School. Hi, Meadowlark people back there and over there. Okay. And then I also want to thank the people that nominated me. Dina Hilbig, the school principal, Ashley Humiston, lead teacher, Carrie Slothauer, counselor, and Kylie Como, our reading coach. And a special thank you to Kylie Como because she helped me with proofreading, all the stuff that I had to type up and send in, and just was a really good source to go to because she won a couple years ago. So thank you, Kylie. Just thanks to the district for selecting me. This is my 21st year teaching at Meadowlark and in this district, and then I taught 2 years before in another district too. But this district has just been awesome as far as supporting me and giving me what I need in order to be a good teacher. I also am a Salina product. I went to school in Salina, so all that I got from the wonderful teachers in Salina throughout the years has just really helped me with this, and it's just exciting. My teaching philosophy, when I think about what I want to pass on to other educators, is just it's all about the kid. You focus on the kid, and you focus on building a relationship with the child to make sure that they feel comfortable in your class. You want to create a class family. In my class, I want all of my kids to know that they have a special role. They have a special job, even if it's just turning the lights on for me. And they own that job throughout the year. And the more that you teach them that I'm going to respect you, then you're going to respect me. And you get that kind of build up with them. You build trust with them, and that's how you get them to learn and how to work in your class. I want my kids to know that I'm not going to give up on them. If they're struggling, we're going to find different ways that we can teach things, and we're going to figure out how it's going to work for everybody, and they don't feel like they're lost and left out, and they feel like they're part of something as far as what we do in the classroom. So I want to teach them to work hard in my class. I want them to work hard. I want them to show pride in what they do, and that's what I want to do as the teacher of the year. I want to make sure that we continue with that. So again, I thank you for everything. Thank you guys for nominating me, and I'm really, really happy that I was nominated and get this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Now I am pleased to introduce to you our secondary teacher of the year, Melanie Hammond, science teacher at South High School. Melanie, I invite you to the podium now.
Wow, Tina, you made that look so easy. Good evening. After my last speech at the board office, my oldest son first told me he now knows why there's a time limit on speeches at the Grammys. So I'm going to keep this one short. I might have a tendency to be long-winded when I talk about my job, but it's only because I'm passionate about what I do. I care deeply about what I teach, but I care about who I teach even more. And I truly believe that every teacher in this district feels the same way. I am so fortunate to be surrounded by an amazing group of educators in this district. I have the privilege of getting to see what they're doing in their classrooms every day. I get to collaborate with them, learn from them, and improve my teaching practices because of what they're doing in their classrooms. I truly believe the teachers in this district are doing everything that we can to engage students in the content and to help them be active learners on a daily basis, because we really do care about the kids we teach. I believe this is true not only in our district, but in public schools across the country. We just need to figure out how to promote ourselves better so that people in this community, in this state, and in this nation can see that too. And I just want to take a moment to say some thank yous. Thank you to my husband, my kids, and my parents for your continued love and support. I know I usually give my best self to my students, and you get whatever's left over. Thank you for understanding why I'm tired at the end of a long day, and for helping me decompress when I get home so I can get back up and do it all over again. Thank you to the teachers that I work with every day. You're my support system on the rough days and my cheerleaders on the good ones. You're the reason why I've been in the same building for 21 years and why it would be very difficult to leave if I ever choose to do so. I hope every teacher in this district has a support system like mine, and if they don't, they need to build one. I want to thank my building administrators and admins throughout the district. I know you have a very thankless job. You do your best to shield teachers from a lot of the negativity that you have to endure every day. So thank you for having our backs. I also want to thank district administrators as well as the Board of Education for the opportunity to represent secondary teachers in USD 305. It truly is a privilege. This district is full of teachers who are worthy of this nomination, and I know I'm only a representative for them. Thank you for the relationship building you do to keep a positive culture in this district and for making USD 305 a great place to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. And we have special gifts and recognitions to present. Each of you receives a $500 check, the H.E. and Irma Lee Nuss Teacher of the Year Award in recognition of your efforts on behalf of Salina Schools. This is the 30th year for these awards, made possible by the Nuss family. H.E. Nuss was the assistant principal at Central High for 10 years and a Kansas educator for 28 years. Irma Lee Nuss was a librarian at USD 305 for 11 years and a Kansas educator for 37 years. She began her teaching career at age 18 in a one-room schoolhouse. Her son, Lawton Nuss, retired Chief Justice of the Kansas Supreme Court, continues to honor his parents' legacy with the Nuss Teacher of the Year Award. We greatly appreciate the support our local businesses give to this program as well. In the bag is a custom-made watch co-sponsored by Jeff Heline Jostens and a gift certificate donated by Martinelli's. The Board of Education presented to you an engraved plaque as a memento of your selection as Teachers of the Year. Your pictures have been hung in the Hall of Excellence outside this room, and your names have been added to the perpetual plaque. Congratulations. Yes. Yes. And now we are going to award for Superintendent Excellence Awards. Our first group tonight goes to Swimming and Diving State Qualifiers at Central High School. Dustin Burgart is the coach, and Jeremiah Thornton is the diving coach. Will you please join Superintendent Excellence? And will all the swimming and diving students please line up next to them? As I call your name, please step towards Superintendent Excellence, and when you're finished, please walk to the end of the line and remain standing. The boys swimming and diving had 4 students qualify for state. The state qualifiers are Cooper Cobb, senior, state runner-up, 1M diving, Brock Dolton, sophomore, 19th place in 100-yard breaststroke. Cooper and Brock competed in the 400-yard freestyle relay along with Zach Tibbetts, Jr., Fidel Torres, Senior, and together they placed 19th. Please allow the Board of Education to congratulate you now. Our next group of awards goes to swimming and diving, state qualifiers at Salina South High School. Dustin Burgard is the coach and Jeremiah Thornton is the diving coach. Please join Superintendent Exline. And will all the swimming and diving students from South High School please line up next to them. The boys swimming and diving had 4 students qualify for state. The state qualifiers are Hayden Smith Jr., 12th place in 1M diving. Trey Berland, senior, 28th place in 100-yard freestyle. Lakin Webb, senior, 22nd place in 100-yard backstroke. Please allow the Board of Education to congratulate you now. And our next group of awards goes to wrestling state qualifiers at South High School. Keenan Wendell is their coach. Will you please join Superintendent Exline in the front? And will all the wrestling students from South High please line up next to them? Students, as I call your name, please step toward Superintendent Exline. After you've received your award, step to the end of the line and remain standing. Kason Dietz, senior, placed first in his weight class. Brandon Fletcher, senior. Ninel Garcia, freshman. Brianna Stone, sophomore, placed 6th in her weight class. Please allow the Board of Education to congratulate you now. Our next group of awards goes to wrestling state qualifiers at Central High School. John Corman is their coach. He's unable to join us. Greg Maring, Central's athletic director, will be joining us. All the wrestling students from Central, please line up next to them. Students, as I call your name, please step towards Superintendent Exline. After you've received your award, walk to the end of the line and please remain standing. Girls, Amelia Kuykendall, junior. Allison Kuykendall, junior. Haley James, freshman. Lydia Dong, sophomore. Bailey Morales, senior. Boys, Jace Adam, freshman, placed 3rd in his weight class. Isaac Fimbanga, junior. Hogan Dawson, junior. Elix Hernandez, senior, placed 4th in his weight class. Julian Castro, senior. Tyrus Young, freshman. Would you please allow the Board of Education to congratulate you now?
Good evening. I wanted to take an opportunity to speak to the board today and the community to just kind of highlight a long-standing partnership that we've had with the Salina Police Department and having school resource officers in our schools. Actually, school resource officers have been with us since December of 1997, and so we've had this long, continuous relationship, and we've had basically from 2 to 4 different officers available for us in our school system throughout that time. So it's been a pleasure to have them working with us side by side, being committed to our community and committed to our schools, and making sure that, you know, they're there to provide their expertise and also to plan with us. We've done crisis planning together. We are able to work with them on a daily basis. They're available to our administrators as we think about the safety within our schools. And so I'd like to introduce the 3 current school resource officers that we have with us today. And so we have Officer Corey Chambers, and he serves Lakewood, South Middle, and Opportunity Now. We have Laura Falk, and she serves South High School and 4 of our elementary buildings. And we also have Officer Matt Woodruff, who serves Central and the other 4 elementary buildings. And so we are very happy to have them working with us on a daily basis. And so it's been a wonderful relationship. And when you think about all of the things that they get to do in our schools, Corey mentioned being able to work with the SAFE campaign and looking at seatbelt safety and making sure that, you know, people are thinking about that safety each and every day as they get in their cars, and getting that kind of imprinted as we talk with our middle school students. He does a transition program at 6th grade, so as students come up to the middle school, they have another adult in the building to have a connection with, and so we're really excited about that. Officer Woodruff spoke to the fact that, you know, he goes out to the elementary marathons and the Hero Day, and so he gets to spend some time at the elementary buildings, but also as he's been getting to know, being his first year at Central, getting to know the Central staff and Central students. And then Laura, she's been working with the different classrooms. She goes and does question and answer sessions. She just finished one up with the social studies classes as they've been studying Constitution and building relationships, you know, with the ELO classes. And so we are excited to be able to have them in our schools and have this long-standing relationship. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you and to highlight all that you do in our schools and our districts, and we're just proud to have them. So, thank you.
I might just throw in there, I spent several years with the sheriff's office, many years working in the schools. I know A.V. Plank, standing over here, one of the first officers in our community in the schools. Mr. Gardner also was with the police department for several years. It's not an easy job. And we were reminded last week that just because you're in the schools doesn't mean it's a safe job. So I want to personally thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's nice to see you here, to be able to put a face with your names, too. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the February 8th, 2022 regular meeting, the minutes of the February 22nd, 2022 special meeting, the personnel report, the financial reports, including the February bills list, the January treasurer's report, the January investment report, the January journal entries, the addendum to the personnel report, the approval of the encumbrance listings to CEL in the amount of $32,800 for professional services for an enrollment marketing campaign, to Techline Sports Lighting in the amount of $265,200 for LED lighting at the 2 South High School softball fields, to approve a wide area network for a 3-year lease to Cox Business in the amount of $586,872, to approve the 2022-2023 textbook rental fees. There's no change from the current year. To approve the Central High fundraising activity for the Central High football program to sell discount cards from June 1st 2022 to August 22nd of 2022. To approve the South High fundraising activity for the South High football program to sell Cougar cards from July 1st, 2022 to August 31st of 2022. To approve the federal Head Start and Early Head Start grant application in the amount of $5,221,000 and 730. Let me start that one over again. There's a few commas in that one. $5,221,737 to include a 25% match of $1,305,434 of in-kind services. It's a lot of money. To approve Kansas Parents as Teachers Program continuation grant in the amount of $80,637 to include a cash match of $51,534 for a total budget of $132,171. And to approve the preschool age at-risk grant application. Funding is 0.5 FTE based on state aid and accompany weightings per qualifying student enrolled. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda as provided.
Okay, Ms. Zimmerman motions, Dr. Bandre seconds. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. The next item on our agenda this evening is the action agenda and the school calendar for 2022 and 2023 with Superintendent Exline.
Thank you, Mr. President. Each year, we have a calendar committee that convenes to make a recommendation to the board for the school calendar. And our calendar committee reviewed the calendar that you had tentatively approved for next year. And we are making the recommendation that what you have tentatively approved just be made the final calendar. We are not suggesting any revisions to that at this time. And so we just need to have a formal approval.
Mr. President, I move we approve the calendar as presented.
Dr. Bandre and Ms. Casso, any discussion on the calendar? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. Next item is the 23-24 calendar with Superintendent Exline.
Okay, so on this calendar, I'm asking for tentative approval. We try to get the proposed calendar out to the public so that people can plan. And so this is for 2023-24. That same calendar committee, which is administrators, teachers, a Board of Education member, we all reviewed several different options. And the option that we are presenting to you, I want to just point out a couple things because it is a little bit different than what we've done before. We actually wanted to delay the start of teachers. And so we are starting on Monday, August 7th. Usually we have started the week prior, okay? What made us to where we could do that, it's when we set graduation. Graduation is set several years in advance, and when we set graduation for the 23-24 school year, we actually set it for May 19th. So it gave us 4 days of wiggle room in the calendar. Teachers are under contract for a certain number of days, and students attend school for a certain number of days. And so by having that May 19th graduation date, we had 4 days to play with, if you will. And so the committee talked about how to use those 4 days, and the decision was to recommend bumping back that beginning when teachers start back to the week of August 7th. Then that also still allows us to have semester end prior to winter recess. That's not a real need at elementary or middle school, but at high school, that is something that we like to do, is to go ahead and end semester prior to winter recess so that the students really do have a break there. The other item to be aware of is that we did embed those two additional days. I told you we had 4 by the date that we set graduation. We embedded those 2 additional days into the spring semester as no school days, okay? One is February 12th. That happens to be the day after the Super Bowl. And so February 12th will be a day that students and staff just would not be in school with this calendar. And then April 8th, that is actually the day before an in-service day, and that would allow families a long weekend. That also breaks up that spring semester a little bit. The spring semester can get long, and so by that May 19th graduation date, it just provided us a little flexibility to try something different. Like I said, this does keep the teacher and student contact days exactly the same. There is no change there. And school does end on May 22nd, so we're out prior to Memorial Day, which is a goal as well. Any questions on that?
If I understand right, this was reviewed by the calendar committee and they were all very pleased with it, is what I heard.
This was unanimous. When I floated we actually had called to see if the Tony's Event Center could move graduation up a week, which would have been Mother's Day. And so we started with 2 calendar options, and then we always give a blank calendar option because we kind of massage from there. And so I had talked to Salina NEA leadership about the idea of maybe just embedding a couple days where we planned to not have school so that families could plan around that and have long weekends. And the leadership was really positive about that. I was pleasantly surprised that the group as a whole was very supportive of this change. There actually there was very little discussion. It was just, yes, this is what we want. So.
And the calendar committee, again, is made up of representation of,
It's administrators, both building and district. It is teachers, NEA leadership is on there, multiple other NEA members. A board member serves on that committee as well. So.
very good. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move we approve the tentative 2023-24 agenda as presented.
The calendar?
Calendar, what did I say?
Good deal.
Calendar.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Schamberger seconds. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. Next item on our agenda tonight is with Mr. Upson regarding the right-of-way at Coronado Elementary.
Good evening. I'd like to bring before you a request from Kansas Gas Service for a right-of-way along the east side of the Coronado Elementary School property. There's an easement that exists there now that is about 70 years old. And that easement basically just describes the entirety of the property and says there's an easement that runs through here for Kansas Gas Service. So this is basically a housekeeping effort from Kansas Gas Service, who wants to replace the gas line that runs along the east side of Coronado, parallel with the railroad tracks there. So what's before you is an easement for a 50-foot easement along the east side of Coronado for Kansas Gas Service. And I can answer any questions that you might have.
Is the 70-year-old history going to happen at other schools too, or is it just Coronado that got caught in this issue?
At this point, it's just Coronado. I can't answer that it may come out somewhere else. I know they're working all up and down the railroad tracks there with both public and private entities trying to get their easements lined up for a replacement gas line.
Any other questions? Would entertain a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the Kansas Gas Service request to establish a utility easement on the east side of the Coronado Elementary School property as presented.
It's a motion. Dr. Bandre seconds. Any other questions? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is with our ADs regarding some additions to our athletic programs.
Thanks for having us this evening. For those of you that don't know us, my name's Ken Stonebreaker. I'm the athletic director at Salina South High School. This is Greg. You want to?
Greg Marion, Salina Central. You're good.
Okay. I just didn't want any confusion as to who was who here, so that way if you got a question for each of us directly, you can ask. I'm going to start by talking about the addition of unified bowling at the high school level. I believe you had some information in your packet, and I'm gonna go through some of that information. I want to try to explain it so people can understand what we're talking about, and but not get in too much detail that I take too much time. Unified Bowling is a program that the Kansas State High School Activities Association enacted just this school year. It was passed by the Acacia Board of Directors in the spring of 2021. And basically what we do is we take students with intellectual disabilities and we partner them with regular ed students in our buildings, and we create a bowling team, and they bowl together. And it is a competitive team. We would probably treat it, where we try to get as much participation as you can, but from Keisha's standpoint and from Keisha's eyes, they will award a state championship trophy at the end of the season. So it does become a competitive program, but from our perspective, we think it would have great value to get our students with intellectual disabilities with our regular ed students, and we see that value on both sides of the spectrum there. So with that, you kind of see some of the definitions probably in your packet there, but it's an inclusive program where we bring everybody together. In the discussions, the athletes are those students with intellectual disabilities, and then the partners are the regular ed students that they partner with. And then our team would have a coach, and then the teams are comprised of basically 5-person teams where they would have at least 3 of those people perform at the same time, and one of those has to be an athlete or a student with an intellectual disability. The other 2 can be the partner, and then you don't have to just use 3. You can use 4, but if you use a 4th, it does need to be an athlete. And so, there's kind of a mix there. There's kind of a blend, and our goal would be to just make sure those kids that want to do this and have a desire to do that, we have partners for them, and we can draw from that and make sure it's a positive experience. As far as requirements go, I won't go into great detail, but because it's a Acacia sport, they're going to have to meet every single requirement that the Acacia has. So there are academic requirements, physicals, all of the things that our current kids that participate in Acacia activity, they're going to have to do the same thing in those activities. It's really a pretty short season. It starts towards the end of September and gets done about the middle of February. And so that information is in your packet, and I did include the dates for next year. I think the state championship is probably the week before Thanksgiving is typically when the state championship is. And they are limited to 4 competitions. So it's governed by Acacia, and they can have 4 competitions. So by the time you start at the end of September, and then you get into October, because you'll probably practice for a couple weeks, and then you're probably going to probably have a meet 4 weeks in a row, and then it's probably time for regional. One thing I would like to point out is because it is a competitive program, we would have to identify which one of our team or teams, and I'm not 100% sure how many go on, it might just be one, that would go to regional. So not all of our kids would go to regional, because we'd have to take what would be the best team, and they would go forward. The competition is in a Baker format, and I'm going to talk to you like I know something about the Baker format in bowling, and I know just enough to probably explain it to you. But if you've gone to any of our high school competitions, we have individual bowling, and then at the state meet and some of our other meets, they're followed by a Baker competition. And a Baker competition is when teammates all take place in the same game of bowling. So this person might bowl in the 1st and the 5th frame, the next person might bowl in the 2nd and the 6th frame, and you just take all that, and that's your team score. It's really a neat concept, and if you've ever been to a high school bowling meet, you see some of our kids, and there's a lot of chanting and cheering and excitement. It's a little bit different than the individual series that take place. And of course, this would happen with obviously athletes and partners. all bowling together in a team and congratulating each other and being positive and so on and so forth. So you kind of have some information there about when substitutions would take place, and a match is 6 games. You think, well, six games of bowling, that could take some time, but it actually moves pretty quickly. It really does. And so I don't see any issue there. Everybody bowls on the same lane. You bowl 3 games on one lane, then you'll move to a different lane. So in case the oil pattern, once again, I'm talking like I know something here, but I've been around long enough that I hear these things. Oil patterns change on the bowling lanes, and so you don't want an advantage with a pattern on one lane versus not another lane. So repeating what I've heard as an athletic director. But anyway, and then they recommend how to participate there. General rules, you kind of see some of those. I don't know that there's anything there that I need to go through. There's also the CASHA rules in regards to unified bowling. We are doing interest survey, and this one's a little more difficult. Greg will talk about esports where we interviewed our students, but here we're trying to interview families. We're using our special ed teachers and some of those people to try to gauge some interest. I think we had 5 to 10 families, and we think it will be more once, if and when we get this program going, we think we'll have more students that will be involved, and so we're really excited about that. Right now, there's about 30 schools that participated in Kansas this first year. I anticipate that to grow. I don't think we're alone in doing this. We wanted to take a year to see what it looked like, talk to some of the schools that do it. We do have 2 schools in our league that do it. It is Goddard Eisenhower and May South. So I could see us participating with them in addition to hosting our own meets here in Salina and just giving those kids an opportunity to do that. We're pretty confident we'll get coaches. Facilities are not an issue. We've talked to the alley here in Salina, very supportive of our high school bowling program, and they indicated they'd be very supportive of this. Basically, we're allowed to practice and do everything there and host our meets there, and then we would charge admission to those meets, and the alley keeps that money. And that's what we've done since we started bowling, and that's what we would intend to do here. So we really feel like we have a pretty good deal there because we get to use some pretty top-notch facilities, and they really don't charge us for that. They just get a little bit of income from the events that we host there. Costs, you'll see that. We think there probably should be 2 coaches involved, and I've given kind of a range there. Coaches is about $4,300. Uniforms would be basically a polo shirt, but not a huge expense, probably $30 to $40, depending on how many kids we had come out. Facility rental, no issue. And then I did include transportation in there if we went to regional and state and maybe an out-of-town meet. So when you look at the total picture, we think that we can do the unified bowling for about $9,000, maybe even a little bit under that, which with the benefit that we think that these kids will get, we think is really a great deal. The one thing I did not mention from the start, we feel like this should be a cooperative agreement between both high schools to start, and then we could look at that and go from there. We actually did that in our soccer programs. It was a cooperative agreement when we started soccer in the Salina schools, and then we evolved into each school having their own program. But we think to start, this should be a cooperative program, which means we would get permission to compete as South and Central together, and we would have one team. And if we have a great number of interest and things of that nature, then we could obviously flip that and have each school have its own program. The other thing I would like to mention is the Board of Education allowed us to start advertising just this year. And so Greg and I are your advertising specialists, so if anybody needs any so we kind of are the ones that took that over. But we had a pretty successful first year with that, and the goal here for both of these programs is to use the money generated from that to pay for these programs. And so I know it's adding a couple of programs at the high school level, but we think it reaches a group of kids that really would benefit from this, and we're very excited about it. And using those advertising dollars, I think, would be a great way to do that. So that's how we are coming to you as not only athletic directors, but our athletic board and our superintendent, and we feel like that would be a great way to start. Before I pass the baton over to Greg, and I'm sorry, I can talk, do you have any questions in regards to unified bowling?
Go ahead.
We've got a couple. Mr. Gardner first.
I've seen it from the college perspective. Are these going to be a guys, girls team? And secondly, are they going to be broken into classes, 1A, 2A, or is it just everybody competes against each other?
Two good questions. One, I should have addressed the first one. It is a co-ed program. So in our case, it doesn't matter if it's boys or girls. It would be a co-ed program. That's both from the athlete perspective and the partner perspective. We would take boys and girls, and we would encourage that. And then what was the second question? This shows you my memory, where I'm at in my point in my life.
Is it going to be structured like Class 5A, 6A?
Oh, it is one classification right now. When Keisha adds sports and classifications, it depends on how many groups do it. So for example, we just came back from the state bowling tournament this weekend, and there was Class 6A, and there was one more class. It was 1A through 5A. And as more teams add bowling, then we'll get more classes, if that makes sense. But right now, with 30 schools, it's one class. I anticipate it would stay that way, and eventually could maybe move into a couple different classes, depending on how many schools actually offer it in their school. Okay?
You used the phrase earlier, kind of regular ed. Would the regular ed participants, could they also be on the straight high school bowling team? Or would people potentially in kind of two sports, or you want to get more involved by having split? Or?
They absolutely could be from the high school bowling team. We also have a number of students who work in the classrooms right now. They serve as aides in our classroom. They do an unbelievable job, just wonderful kids that have a connection with those kids too. So I could see some of those kids having an interest and the opportunity to joining that program as well. But we will treat it like a Keisha sport, so you can't be out for football and this unless you would offer a dual participation and both coaches agreed. So we would follow all the rules that we have set forth. But high school bowling is a different season. It starts tryouts in December, and we don't start the season until January 1st. So I would anticipate that we'll have some high school bowlers that will have some interest.
That answered my question.
One of the questions I had was collaboration with Special Olympics. With it being a Keisha sport, obviously they can't compete here and at a Special Olympics event, so is that all coordinated and working together?
It is. I contacted our local chapter here, and this required just a little bit of research, but I got on the internet and did it in a few seconds. Then we belong to the North Central chapter for the Special Olympics.
Correct.
And then at the state level, the person that's responsible for unified sports is a gal by the name of Taylor Oberstadt. And Taylor was the one that I talked to originally. And then I also talked to the coordinator that is housed in Manhattan as part of the North Central. And then I talked to our local group, and I believe the group that they use, that they call themselves is the Blue Thunder. Does that sound right? And all of them are very supportive, very excited, and I believe the Blue Thunder bowl at a different time. So we did make those connections, and we talked to all of those people, and they're on board, very excited and very hopeful. So we feel very confident with that too.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Stonebreaker?
All right. I'll turn it over to Greg.
I will not be that long. Esports, what is esports? Basically, it's we're playing video games within the building, and that's what esports are. The benefits of esports is it builds character. Just like bowling, this is going to be co-ed, so we're going to have boys and girls combined on a team for this esports. The other thing that's good about esports is the technology base that comes with it, and it provides pathway for students for majors in college and so forth. It also gives kids who are passionate about gaming, and it's a different type of activity that we don't offer, that we hope to grow and get a different type of student athlete involved in this. The benefits also that we've seen, or that they've seen from this, is that the grades in schoolwork improve just like any other activity. So that's pretty important. One of the things that this is not a Keisha-sponsored event yet. It will be. We feel like in the near future. There right now, and then I'm going to jump around here and I'm going to come back. Right now, there are about 50 schools in the state of Kansas who have esports, and it is going to go to the Kansas Athletic Directors Conference here in the spring for a vote there to see if we send it on to the board, Keisha board, to see if it gets approved for it being sanctioned as a state event next year. If it's not next year, it will be the year after that, most definitely, if you're asking my opinion. I think it probably passes this year, but we'll have to wait and see. So anyway, that's what that is. And the reason I bring that up is we're going to treat it like a Acacia event. And yes, there's no physical aspect of esports. It is, working at the computer and playing games. But we're going to treat it like a Acacia event. We're going to have the same requirements that we would for any Acacia student doing an activity or event. So we are going to require those eligibilities of passing 5 classes. We are going to have them take a physical and be a part of that, and do the final forms that we do with other sports as well. The coaching aspect of it as well, we will treat as a Acacia sport or activity. So if we have a coach who is not within our building, they will have to take tests and be Acacia approved as well for that. So that is what we're looking at. We are also going to go with what is called Play Versus. It is one group that offers esports. And the reason we chose Play Versus is that they have affiliation with the National Federation of High School Athletics. And so if the state of Kansas adopts esports as a sport, that's the group that they will use. So that's why we're choosing that. It's going to follow in with the state of Kansas and Acacia using that program. The season, there are 2 seasons for esports. There's a fall from September to November and a spring from February to April. There is preseason so that we can kind of take a look at our teams and group them together and of a combination of groups. And the seasons last about 8 to 10 weeks long. The nice thing about Play Versus as well is they will set up our schedule for us, and we will play teams within our region, the central region. So it wouldn't be just Kansas, but other regional states as well. And then when it becomes a state-sanctioned sport, when we get to competitions for state, obviously it would just involve the schools in the state of Kansas. For postseason, once we hit postseason and it is approved from Acacia, the top 2 teams in each activity or sport that we are playing in or games that we're playing will be representing our schools. And we could have more than 2 teams. We could have 5 or 6 teams just depending on interest. Depending on what the game is, usually we can have 2 players up to 7 players on a game. It just depends on which game we have chosen to play. And right now we're recommending 2 as of today, and that is the League of Legends and Rocket League. And those can be played on our PCs, which is what we're going to start with. You can play games on consoles like PlayStation and Play Versus, and Nintendo Switch. But we're not going to start with that. We're going to start with our PCs first and try to start with those 2 games. Start small, see what the interest is, and then we can build from there. We did survey our students at South and Central. And at Salina Central, we had 70% of our students who would be interested in it, and that's 9 through 11th. And 72% at Salina South are interested in esports. We did break down costs for you as well, and these are just estimated costs because, again, we're not for sure about licensures and so forth. Each license, so each student will have a license, and it's $64 per student for that licensure. Not knowing how many we would have involved, we don't know what the total cost would be. But what we have there, or what I've written down there as an overall cost or estimate, is we would have 1 coach at both South and Central. We would offer at least 8 licensures, and then probably 8 more. We're thinking maybe 16, and it could be more than that. But on this estimate, we're looking at 16 licenses. And then we would also pay for some T-shirts, so forth for that. So what we're looking at is a total of about $4,500 per school per season on that. And again, the cost would come out of our advertisement money. Again, we think this is an important piece that we can bring to our students. Again, we think it'll be a different group of students that will be interested in this, and we'll get more participation in representing our schools, different group of kids representing our schools, which everybody wants to belong within our school. So we think that's a great piece. One of the things too is esports is fast growing. They even have it on TV now where you can watch them play live on TV, and there's lots of money in it and lots of scholarships. It's amazing the amount of scholarships that are out there for kids in esports. So at that, I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have.
Would these be loaded on the pads that they have that are issued at the school, or would they be special computers that needed to
These would be computers that we have in our computer labs, and they would stay within the building. And Play Versus is kind of it's not really downloaded to your computer. It's a website that you log on to and play from there.
Ms. Cusso?
First of all, awesome. It's great that you're thinking outside the box and bringing more kids finding something they love to do. Even more important is that you found your own funding. Nobody does that, so that's awesome. Question, with those numbers being interested, where will you be hosting this, and do you foresee having to come up with a space that becomes their own?
Well, right now, we're planning on hosting it in our computer labs, and we would practice after school within our computer labs. And the thing about esports too is they have a set time for competition, and those are at 4 o'clock. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, I believe, are those days. And then, so we would practice on the other days that we don't. So at this point, anyway, we think that we can handle it within our computer labs. These games also, if the kid's interested, and the ones that we talked about, 3 or 4 kids have come up and said, man, I love that game, and I've never heard of them. So, but anyway, that being said, they have these at home, and they'll play them at home and improve as well. You can get online and participate online as an individual besides being on your school team.
Dr. Bender?
No question, but just an observation. I was glad you mentioned the college scholarships. I worked at Kansas Wesleyan when they started this, and they were kind of on the ground floor. Bethany, where I work now, started it 2 years ago, and it's proved to be a great retention tool. So I anticipate that'll be the case for some young people that might not be as studious as they might be. This will help, since they have to meet requirements, it might help in that regard too. And, you know, Dana mentioned the funding and so forth that way. The world has changed. There's lots more colleges involved in this, but there's money out there. I mean, when Kansas Wesleyan first got started in it, Dr. Thompson was on some committees, and most of their equipment got donated. I doubt that's as prevalent these days, but there's interest out there for sure.
There is, and there are hopefully some money out there for us to go get to help upgrade our computers if we need to, or continue to build our computer labs if possible. But we'll sure look into that and see if we can't get a hold of some of that and help our cause.
Ms. Schamberger?
So I think it's a great idea. Anyway, by the way, I was talking to a friend about this last night, and I was looking at that. So it's just for the money part of it, the estimate of the per season is $4,500, and there's 2 seasons, and there's 2 schools, right?
Yep. Yes,
So
ma'am.
we're talking like around $18,000. So do you have enough money for that, or?
We
do you
can
need-
always use more.
Well, I think so. Well, I didn't know if you had any community sponsors or somebody that would kind of help with this.
We have not gotten to that part yet, and no, we do not have community sponsors for that, but it's something that we could obviously look at. But we know it's a big chunk of change, but again, we think it's important.
And our advertising will allow us to do that and still have some. And so it's not like we would be using all of the advertising dollars for that. So, you know, we feel like that's been successful and gets us going in the right direction.
Correct.
It's interesting because, I mean, just thinking KWU, I know has a competitive team. I guess I didn't know Bethany did too, so that's interesting.
Yep.
And I know there's some conversation in the community about even maybe facilities out there at some point and that would host these things at a bigger level.
Right, and we've been fortunate to go to Kansas Wesleyan and tour their gaming facility, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, good deal. Ms. Schamberger?
So I learned some things last night, but, so you don't use a graphic card with this, you just download it onto the computer?
I believe it's on a website where we don't even download it.
Okay, that's great.
Am I right on that?
Dwight Christie from MIS. We've been working with Dwight, and so I don't know if he wants to answer that, but I kind of sound like a caveman when we get to the technical part, so.
The organization is very conscious of not everybody having high-end equipment, so they pick the games that don't need the high-end graphic cards specifically, so everybody can participate.
Ms. Zimmerman?
Yes, I just want to add that, well, I'm glad to hear they have to take a physical. I was thinking it would be wise to connect the health of the mind with the health of the body and have some fitness program attached to this so that we don't have a lot of really successful lumps out there, you know.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a suggestion.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Ladies, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is with Dr. Stevens regarding textbooks.
All right, good evening. May it please the board that from September 2021 through February of 2022, 29 educators across the secondary programs basically reviewed 22 textbook titles. And those are the textbook titles I bring forward for tonight's discussion. They are in the fields of career and technical education, math, science, social studies, and world language. The materials proposed for the adoption do align with state standards and USD 305 curriculum. Furthermore, the resources were all vetted with board-approved criteria, and general criteria, factual knowledge, accuracy of information, ethical standards, balanced views, as well as research-based pedagogical practices that support our teachers with addressing content standards in depth. For example, also criteria that boost communication skills with reading and writing activities and strategies for improving vocabulary and comprehension. The criteria also does help boost critical thinking through extension of learning and differentiation activities. The textbooks were also evaluated on technology components so that the online materials work with our Chromebooks, as well as any onboarding school information system. I believe the program's called Clever. And we do have a couple of textbooks that are hard copies only. But overall, I want to thank the hardworking educators who spent a lot of time in reviewing these using the board-approved criteria. Also want to thank the administrators and counselors and support staff who helped step in and sub and supervise when the teachers were participating in that extensive review process. And Amy Langen and Patty Fiorillo for their attention to detail and helping me keep all these quotes straight so that I can keep them organized. Overall, though, 22 titles are being brought forward in the board packet for discussion tonight, and I recommend the Board of Education approve the proposed textbook adoptions for the upcoming 22-23 school year. And I'll yield the remainder of my time to the board.
Okay. Dr. Bandry.
I appreciate all the information that's in the packet. I did read through it in advance, and frankly, I have no questions about the books. I mean, I trust, it's a great committee that you put together, and I trust their work. Are there any pieces of this that you're at all concerned about?
In terms of the titles, no. We are seeing a transition in books. In the past, you would buy an online license and a hard copy separate. Many of those are now being bundled together. And because of that, there's just some pieces of that puzzle that we're tracking down. But in the past, usually the online license were a little bit cheaper and the hard copies were more expensive. Post-COVID, that's kind of flipped and they've been bundled. And so we're really seeing some transition and changes. And with that also comes more shipping costs, which is a very big concern that as we're looking forward and trying to make sure that our quotes are reflecting the best price we can get given the business that we're doing with these publishers.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. Brings up a second question. I know this is on the discussion agenda, but shipping is a very real thing. It seems like gas prices are going up every day right now. Is this something that we might need to consider moving to the action agenda just to try and save some money on shipping?
We have done a couple of quotes where we have called back and the dates are changing that amount. Having said that, I'd yield the wisdom of the board on whether or not they want to move that on an agenda item.
I'm certainly open to discussion amongst the panel to move it forward. I mean, for my part, again, I read through everything here. I'm certainly no expert on especially geometry, but you're supposed to laugh there, by the way, but the rest of, it all makes sense. And the committee's carefully reviewed this. For my part, I would have no problem moving it forward, but wonder what others think.
Any other conversation with the board? I might ask real quick, talk about the committee a little more.
Yeah.
That's been involved, just background.
Absolutely. So 29 educators, 15 of which hold master's degrees and possess an impressive 368 years of collective teaching experience, reviewed 55 textbooks in these areas. 2 of those teachers were Kansas Teacher of the, Master Teacher of the Year, and some secondary education Teachers of the Year for 305. We also had individuals that spent time kind of looking through the online resources that come with the textbooks, because many of these publishing companies have transitioned to that. So the committee that not only reviewed the hard copy text, the online license, many of these online licenses are 6-year rotations. And we did have some curriculum work as well, using the Understanding by Design template, which helps our students make sure that we're kind of moving the rigor in the right direction with transfer skills. So there was extensive work on the committees, and many of these, one of the things for the large number this year is that we did postpone some textbook renewals from last year for our inability of getting teachers together for safety protocols, and then also subs. And again, I cannot stress enough the support that administrators, counselors, support staff provided for our teachers to be gone to do that extensive work. So the committee that worked through and reviewed this, not only the criteria I previously mentioned before, but we also had extensive work looking at the project-based learning possibilities for these textbooks, and whether or not they can provide quality formative and summative assessments to measure student learning. The criteria is available in my office, along with just a ton of books that are in there on the floor, kind of all gathered around. And I would welcome anybody, if they did want to look at them, they certainly have that possibility too. But the teachers, I just can't stress enough, as they reviewed this material, they were definitely making sure that they were keeping a good eye for what is going to work with our students. And the teachers themselves, many of them, when we were reviewing these materials, understand that there's incredible amount of interest, but wanting to make sure that we have what meets the needs of our students. And so I do feel very good about the criteria, as well as, of course, their professionalism and hard work in meeting that.
I'd like to add to that if I could. So when we are reviewing a chemistry textbook or an AP psychology textbook or a metals textbook, we need people that are content area experts. And so the teachers that are actually teaching those classes that have degrees in those areas are the ones that are reviewing them. And so it may be that a small group of the algebra teachers are reviewing the algebra book, and a different group of teachers is reviewing geometry. A different group of teachers would be reviewing the AP psychology, clearly. And when all of those groups, all of those content areas have particular standards that they have to meet. And so the teachers are weighing what is in the textbook against the standards that they have to teach, or in a CTE class, the competencies that they have to teach, or in an AP class, the advanced placement criteria that the Regents schools have set for us. And so it requires quite a bit of skill to be able to say, here's what the competency says, and yes, this meets that or not. And then also, is this a good way to deliver the content to the age student I have? Because content delivery does look different for freshman students versus juniors, seniors, students that are enrolled in AP classes. So.
I have a question, Jim.
Yes.
I have no problem with this, but you might speak to why a sports medicine would be chosen, because that seems like a very small group of people that would be used for.
Sure. And in the high school curriculum, there's about 156 different kinds of courses. And so this is something that actually aligns with not only our pathways that we have for career and technical education courses. So you see some of these single titles, so to speak. But that particular course can have an enrollment, as I'm looking here, and I'm sorry I didn't memorize all of the numbers on this, but some years we will have the need for 60, some years we'll have a need for 140 students that are enrolling in that course. And so those programs are aligned with our career clusters and our pathways for a student that wants to maybe pursue it afterwards. So you see some of these individual topics. Another one that you might run into is like anatomy and physiology. Those are all supporting courses that lean to the career and technical education pathways. Yeah. And the enrollment, I might add on that, does shift quite a bit. So we've looked at past historical numbers, and then also using Zello, our individual plan of study software this year, to be able to predict what those numbers are going to be.
Keep in mind that for a pathway to be funded, a pathway is just a series of classes that would prepare students and help them explore a particular career field, okay? So for a pathway to be funded, we have to have 3 levels of courses, and you need to correct me if I misspeak, but we have to have introductory courses, application courses, technical courses, all 3 of those. And so in those pathways then, there are courses that are as specific as sports medicine is one of our actual courses that we teach. And one of the great things in being in a district this size and having the number of students that we do is just the sheer number of courses that Dr. Stevens said that we have the ability to offer students so that they can explore while they're still in high school, is this a fit for me? Is this something I want to study when I go on to post-secondary school? And maybe narrow things out and maybe start narrowing in on, okay, I know I really do want to do a health science kind of career.
Yeah, and one of the other classes I was going to add on there, Intro to Engineering, was that course that this board approved because of the need for the funding. And then you also have some single titles for like AP courses that are just content specific. Any other questions?
Dr. Bender?
Mr. President, in light of the great work this committee has done and the fact that nothing's going to change in the next month beyond shipping costs likely increasing rather a lot, I'd like to make a motion that we move the proposed textbook adoptions from the discussion agenda to the action agenda and approve the recommendations as presented.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Dr. Stevens. Ms. Peters.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me tonight to present enrollment and financial update to the board. The previous speakers tonight are going to help me a lot because I can just lead right into a lot of different areas. One thing I wanted to mention about Dr. Stevens' presentation was that we planned ahead for these textbook adoptions. If you recall, at the end of the year, we pre-funded some of this, so we had about $1.2 million in our textbook rental fund in order to fund these adoptions that you're going to see this meeting and at the next meeting. So we always are planning ahead and projecting out. But tonight I want to focus on our general fund budget, our operating budget for next year. And any decision that we make, including financial, we need to consider our vision and our mission. And we talked about that at the last board work session, the vision of transforming Salina and the world, and the mission of being the best place to learn and work. So everything we do evolves around those items. So how do we do that? How do we strive to meet the mission? We want to recruit and retain quality staff. We know that staff is our #1 resource and that most of our budget is spent on staff. So that's a focus each and every year. The next one we look at is increasing opportunities for students. Whether it's dual credit opportunities that you've added the last couple of years, the summer school program that you've approved. We just talked about, when Curtis was talking about the different courses, the CTE programs, athletics. Tonight, we had a great example with esports and unified bowling. These are additional opportunities for students that will allow students to be more engaged each and every day, which then leads to that vision of transforming Salina and the world. The other thing we want to look at is how do we provide resources for students? This could be educational resources like Dr. Stevens talked about, so the actual textbooks and instructional materials. It could be our mental health resources that we provide in our schools through our counselors and our social workers, or our partnerships in the community with Central Kansas Mental Health, our Big Brothers Big Sisters, the CAPS program, just to name a few. So as we're considering these, we also have some factors to consider when looking at budget planning. So what is our enrollment doing? What is the state providing in state aid? And then are there any opportunities for short-term targeted federal funding that may come into the mix? When we're talking about the general fund operating budget, it's based on a September 20th count day. This is a graph that shows our enrollment trend for USD 305. Statewide, public and private schools have seen over a 3% decline the last few years, and we're no different in that regard. We've seen a declining enrollment trend. Saline County births are down overall. USD 305's percentage of those births that are coming into our schools is actually increasing, that percentage is. However, because the birth rate is going down, our graduating classes are larger than our kindergarten classes coming in. So our numbers are decreasing. I don't know if you saw, KASB just put out an enrollment study that they had done, and that's a statewide study. It's not local to our situation here, but statewide, what they're seeing is they're expecting about a 0.4 to 1.4 decrease for the next 5 years, with a cumulative decrease of 5.2%. So this is what we're seeing statewide, and most districts are facing declining enrollment. So for funding, we can choose the higher of the prior 2 years for our general fund operating budget. So we already know which year we're going to use for funding, and this provides us with some time to plan for that declining enrollment. But we are facing some budget pressure because of that. The other part of that equation then is what's happening with our base state aid per student. What is the legislature providing? And this is provided through legislation and appropriations at the state level. You can see from this graph, the last 6 years we've seen increases to the base state aid. And that's as a direct response to the Gannon funding lawsuit. And we truly appreciate our legislators and that they put money into the formula for schools. It's really made a difference statewide and here locally. So although our enrollment's going down, the base is going up, which helps offset that. So when we're talking about dollars for us then, and we're planning for next year's budget, so the 22-23 school year, what does it mean in dollars? We're focusing on the general fund tonight. KSDE then has looked at our enrollment. They know our enrollment trend, and we know the higher of the prior 2 years, and they provide us with an estimate. It came out in January. And so based on that, plus the base state aid going up, we're going to see our budget authority decrease by $122,000 next year. So we know right off the top we need to find reductions to take care of that decrease. We need to spend less dollars next year. Next, we need to think about fixed costs increase, because as you know, if we do everything just the same, things are going to cost more. We just talked about transportation. That's one that's on everybody's mind. In each and every one of our own budgets, we're having to plan for that cost. Well, we're having to plan for that here at the district as well. We have our transportation contract that goes up each year, plus the cost of fuel. Utilities, we have to calculate an increase there. And then insurance, when you're thinking about property, liability, cyber, those items are also increasing because of the things we've seen nationwide with catastrophic losses. And Dwight's going to talk tonight about the cyber area, so that'll fit in nicely with this. So that's about $250,000 that we need to account for and take care of with our budget in order to just maintain what we're doing. And then finally, we mentioned that staff is our #1 resource, and it's where we spend most of our budget. So to fund the salary schedule, step and movement for staff that are paid or supported by general fund, it costs about $600,000. So our projected deficit for next year that we need to work on a plan for is about $973,000. And that's before any cost of living increases for staff. It's before any staffing changes. So what are we doing about it? What actions are we taking? Well, the budget planning process is continuous and ongoing throughout the entire year. I work on it daily. That's part of my job. But specifically, some of the things we're doing, the tools that we have in our budget toolkit, we're evaluating all our programs. We're assessing needs at the district and the building level. We're gathering input from stakeholders, analyzing expenditures to find out where can we be more efficient. We're studying all staffing levels. Where do we have openings? Where can we make adjustments through attrition? We're looking at salary, benefit, and leave packages for staff. As we know, we want this to be the best place to work. We're preparing cost projections. I spend half my life doing that. And then I'm also monitoring, and I think we all are monitoring legislative action on a daily basis, because that can impact the budget for next year as well. So the goal is the same every year. It's to implement plans for a balanced budget while maintaining focus on our mission. And we have a plan in place that's going to do that. One thing you should understand is the general fund, we spend it to zero each and every year. We can't carry over a cash balance to the next year in the general fund. And so we have to have a balanced budget. I wanted to mention a couple of things before I transfer over to talking about the ESSER funding. We do have an enrollment study taking place. We wanted to get an outside objective view of the enrollment trends here in USD 305, and we have such a positive outlook in Salina for jobs, and then the city is working on their project with the housing. And so because of that, we wanted to get a long-term look at what our trend's going to be, because that'll help us focus financially on if there's some long-term needs that we need to look at. So that'll be taking place, and we should be ready for a report for you in the summer. Also tonight on the consent agenda, you approved the marketing campaign. And so this is real exciting. When thinking about enrollment, it's really a way to spread the word about USD 305 and why it's the best place to work and learn. So then I'm going to transition into ESSER funding. I mentioned that sometimes we have an opportunity through federal funding with some short-term targeted funding. And we have ESSER 3 funding right now that we're working on and we're going to be applying for. ESSER stands for Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund. And as a reminder, they are federal funds. They can't be used for our regular operating budget. So I can't just take care of our general fund operating budget with these dollars. It's specific for what we can spend those dollars on. The funds are short-term. We have to have them spent by September 30th of 2024. And you can see there I've listed what the funds are intended for. So safely reopen schools, measure and address the learning loss caused by the pandemic. Just all COVID-related is what these dollars are for. And then any other action to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on students, families, and our staff. Part of the ESSER 3 process is that we get input from our stakeholders. And so Lynn and Shanna and I have held over 19 stakeholder meetings. We've had group and individual planning meetings with building leaders, administrators, and executive team. So we've met with students, parents, teachers, staff, community groups. And so we've incorporated all of that input into our plan that we'll be submitting. I did want to go over then where those dollars are going to be targeted from ESSER 3. It's about $13.6 million in this round of funding. So based on that input, there's a few items that I want to talk about where the dollars are going to go. Keep in mind, the building leaders, so the principals of the buildings, they have their individual plans of these dollars and how they're going to implement it in their building at the building level. So based on their needs for their students and their staff. They will be implementing those plans, and then they're going to be monitoring and measuring the result and impact from these funds. And that's a part of the reporting that we'll have to do on the back end. It's a formal application process. It's very intensive. With federal funding, it always is. But this is something even at a higher level than we've ever seen. To apply for it, track it, account for it, measure it, report on it. My staff has added 984 general ledger accounts to track the COVID relief dollars with all of the COVID funding we've received. So we are tracking it by building level, by allowable use, by function and object like we always do, very specific. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of areas. I'm just going to talk about the larger ones, and this is from the input that we received. We're putting about almost 15% into full-time certified substitute teachers. This is something we heard over and over about, that we have a need in that area, and this will allow us to stay open and provide that continuous instruction. We've seen this on a lot of ESSER plans from other districts as well. On the personnel report, it is labeled as a roving teacher, but for the application, it will be the full-time certified subs, and that will be in every building. Then we have the staff retention and recruitment, about 33%. As I mentioned, staff's our number one thing, our number one resource, and so we want to make sure that we keep our staff here with us and treat them right. So you've approved the retention incentive plans, and we'll continue that, and that's what these dollars here represent. Addressing the learning loss, about 27% in that area. And that speaks directly to, what these funds are all about, is to meet the students where we need to meet them to close those gaps that have been caused by the pandemic. So additional resources in our schools, certified and classified interventionists that are working with students, whether in small group, sometimes it's an additional classroom teacher, and to really meet the needs of the students where they are. Then we have mental health supports, just about 11% there in that category. And this was probably the number one thing we heard at the stakeholder meetings, I would say. And this isn't just about students, but it's about students and staff. So when we're talking about the mental health supports, it's social workers in all buildings, and it's contracting mental health services as well in addition to that. And then the other piece that we are adding with ESSER 3 is a staff wellness piece. And so each building will have an allocation for that, and they will use those dollars to improve the wellness of their staff. So that's a new piece that wasn't a part of ESSER 2. And then you can see the other smaller categories there, but I did want to highlight a few of the larger ones. On our website, under the accountability reports where you see the other budget information, there are links to the state ESSER website, and it shows all the applications that have been approved by the State Board of Education. So when ours is approved, which will probably be, it's about 2 months out is how long it takes, that will be out there for anyone to view. It also has the expenditure reporting by district and by state, and it breaks it out by allowable use. So it's a great tool for you and for the patrons in our district to use. You also see the monthly activity in a summary level on the treasurer's report monthly. So keep that in mind, that that's in your consent agenda. So between the budget plan we have with our general fund and then also with these federal dollars, I think the overall plan really hits a variety of needs in line with our vision and our mission. And with that, I will answer any questions that you might have.
Dr. Bender?
I'm particularly intrigued by what might come of the marketing campaign. Obviously, we started the virtual school last year to try to save some people, and I'm curious to see how that goes in the second year, but I'm also curious how many people we might have lost to homeschool or private schools in the community that might come back. It's too early to predict, but I'm really curious to see how that goes. And I don't necessarily have a question about it. The place where I work has to deal with HERF funds, just like you're dealing with ESSER funds, and it seems a bit of an oxymoron, but it's kind of a challenge to spend funds the right way. And there's just some misconceptions out there, but I appreciate all the work juggling to try and put those in the right places, and I think we've been pretty creative about ways to use those to help keep people around, is what it comes down to. So I guess for my part, I don't have any questions now. Always concerned about budget cuts. I know why they have to happen, and I look forward to seeing what the recommendations are so we can try and make sure that it remains the best place to work and learn.
Okay, Ms. Peters, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your time. I know we'll continue to be evaluating that and keeping apprised of it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is Mr. Christie regarding cybersecurity.
Thanks for having me. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about cybercrime and what we can do about it. I'm sure you've all heard on the news and everything, different attacks, data breaches, so forth, and how large companies have spent millions and sometimes billions of dollars on such instances. But what you may not have heard is how much that is now being directed towards school districts in the last few years. For example, since 2016, we've seen a 600% increase in attacks on school districts. That's pretty dramatic in a short period of time. Microsoft recently reported that 61% of all malware occurs within educational environments. So they're attacking us more than most. The bigger concerns really is when we start looking at numbers and what this costs school districts if they do get attacked, successful attacks. On average, a data breach, or if somebody has hacked in and stolen data from our systems, on average it'll cost a district somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. On a ransomware attack, a successful ransomware attack will cost a district about $2.73 million. Obviously, those are very high numbers we'd like to avoid. To that end, in 2020, there were almost 1,700 such successful attacks on school districts within the country, within the United States, just in that 1 year. Pretty alarming. So why are they starting to attack schools so much more? There's really a few simple reasons. One is we have a lot of unsecured devices. And I don't mean that we don't secure our devices as well as we can. What I mean is we have over 8,000 devices that have the ability to walk out of our district, off our campus, and get connected to the internet via other networks, other internet connections. We have no control over what happens. Then they bring them back into our district and they possibly infect our systems here. We have very limited IT security staff available. Across the country, there's over 300,000 open IT security positions just in this country. Yet there's only about 3,000 people out there actively looking to fill those positions. So it becomes extremely difficult for us to try to hire anybody to do this work. We also have a couple of things that create additional vulnerabilities, and that is we have a lot of third-party services, online applications and everything that get used in schools. We also have a lot of different sources of funding and dollars that go back and forth to a lot of different areas. These all open up more avenues for people to attack us than what happens at a normal industry or a normal large corporation. So we're more vulnerable just because there's more ways to attack us. But the biggest reason they've gone to schools in the recent history is because the large corporations and large industry, large government agencies have gotten really good at protecting their systems. To that end, they say, well, it's easier to attack the smaller people than it is the bigger. They don't have the resources or, quite honestly, the talent to hack into Citibank or the federal government or NATO or anything like that. So they attack schools, much easier targets. In a nutshell, they've said, we can't get the $1 million payoffs anymore, but I can get $110,000 payoffs, and that comes out to be the same thing. So what can we do about it? Well, we already do quite a bit. I think you should feel safe about how much we do in this district already to help protect against cyber attacks. We do extensive filtering. We encrypt data. We test and train our staff. We have pretty good virus and malware protection on all of our devices. And on top of that, we've built some really solid firewalls for anything coming in via the internet. But what do we not do that we need to do to make it better? We don't have constant surveillance of all the incoming and outgoing data. We can only look at what's going on and what our systems tell us when we're on the job. That's 8 to 10 hours a day, not 24 hours a day. We don't constantly examine our data storage. We do it on an occasional basis. We say, okay, I'm going to run a program that examines all our data and our applications we have, and then we go fix the problems. We need to do that constantly, minute by minute, hour by hour, not just every once in a while. And we need to constantly evaluate our entire network environment and configuration. Once again, we do that on an occasional basis. That needs to be constant. Again, minute by minute, hour by hour. We can't afford to wait days to do it or weeks. So how do we get those services? How do we accomplish those things that we're not doing now? In a nutshell, it's a process that's called Managed Detection and Response, or MDR. Look it up or Google it, you'll get a whole bunch of information about it. What we need to do is manage all the data, applications, and systems that we have, detect any anomalies or any security threats, and then respond to those threats. Can we do it ourselves with what we currently have? No. The simple answer is we can't do it with what we have right now. Part of the reason is to do those kind of services, it would cost us literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in hardware and software. And on top of that, we need to hire probably somewhere between 2 to 4 IT security specialists. Just mentioned how hard it is to find those type of people. So we can't do it, so what's the solution? We figure the solution is to hire a third-party entity that can provide these services for us. To that end, we went out and started the process of finding such a company that can provide those services. We went through and detailed what we're doing and what we need to do in much greater detail than what I just covered. I mean, very granularly, so we could ask the different companies, what do you do? What do you not do? What can you do for us to help us out? Then I went through and we did a whole bunch of research online, working with groups like Gartner Group, G2. These are organizations that specialize in research and assistance for IT services and software. We polled over 50 other school districts, both in the state of Kansas and Missouri, to determine what are they doing, how are they taking care of this situation, or are they doing anything? The scary part is how many aren't doing anything at this point in time. Every one of them replied with, we need to do something, and we're working on starting to do something. So that was good to hear. And then finally, we asked all our current vendors, what are you doing for this kind of service? What do you recommend for us? The nice thing about this research is there was one company that cropped up in all areas of the research. That company is a company called Arctic Wolf, and they provide this kind of service. So even though Arctic Wolf was the one that came up in all three, we identified 4 of what we determined to be the top 4 candidates to provide us this service for us. With those top 4 candidates, we held whole bunches of online meetings, demonstrations, and listed all the services, evaluated what services they could and couldn't provide, how important was it to us, how unimportant was that service to us. And at the end of all that research and all that evaluation, we came up with the same name. Arctic Wolf provides the most complete service on the market. So, what does Arctic Wolf provide that others don't? They have been in business for over 20 years, which doesn't sound like a long time, but in this industry, that's several generations worth. They have over 1,300 employees, which means a small fluctuation in their staffing isn't going to affect the service they can supply us. They have superior detection algorithms, and by that I mean the algorithms that they use to examine everything will find more threats and not find as many false alarms. So in other words, they won't send us as many false alarms, say, hey, you got to take care of this, and then it turns out it's not a problem, and we just wasted days taking care of something that we didn't need to. That's big when you're short-staffed. They have a faster response time than the others. Upon them identifying a threat, the average time before they notify their district or their customer is 5 minutes. That's amazing, and that is important because attacks can happen quickly, as we know. They do a much deeper evaluation of our current network configuration and environment. In fact, a couple of the companies didn't even provide that service. They won't do a deep dive evaluation of our current status and tell us where we have vulnerabilities. Arctic Wolf will. They do something, they have a service that I really like, and that is the unlimited event logs and data. They will search however many logs, however much data we send them, or however much data we have in our possession. They'll scan it all. Others have limits. Either you can't go beyond that limit, or they charge you extra if you do go beyond that limit. And probably most important along that lines is the fact that all these services are full service 24/7, 365. Other companies say, well, during the business hours, you get this level of service. Outside business hours, you get a much lower level of service. We need it 24/7 because the attack is just as likely to happen at 2 o'clock in the morning as it is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So they do something that's really nice for my staff, and that is we'll have regular meetings with them, vulnerability meetings that will identify and discuss what they're doing well, what we're doing well, what we're not doing so well, and changes in our processes that we need to take place. This will happen throughout the contract with them. We will, if it's every month we need it, if it's every week we need it, however often we need those meetings, we can have those meetings with their staff to help us do a better job. Most important to me directly is a simple idea that this is a company that can provide the service without requiring additional staff requirements from MIS. Any of the other solutions would probably require us hiring an IT security specialist. Once again, I just covered how that's hard to come by. So that is hugely important to me. At this time, we have a quote from a local vendor, Eagle Technologies, to provide Arctic Wolf services for 1 year and on an annual basis. We can renew on an annual basis, and it's $201,989 a year with a one-time installation cost of just over $8,000. That's a quote we currently have in our hands. So, any questions?
I have a comment. I actually went and listened to a conversation about this at the conference. They said it's not if, it's,
Yes.
I mean, it's happening.
when.
You're going to get it.
Yes.
And they also spoke to, and maybe you can help other people understand, it's not just a cost. They hold things ransom.
Correct.
And that's what they're asking for money for. But it also messes up your system and your usage, and you might
There's a
talk-
lot of different methods that they use. Actually, what's become more popular in school districts nowadays is that they steal your data and hold the data itself for ransom.
Right.
The problem with that for a school district is legal requirements that once that data is stolen, we have to be able to notify everybody who possibly that data could affect. We have to notify all of them. That is literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours of time to try to do all that. That's the indirect costs that I was mentioning earlier. That's scary. The ransomware, yes, it's very much a matter of they close up your system so you can't do business until you pay them for them to open it up. The biggest issue there is there's no guarantee that you pay them that they'll actually release your systems. You may pay them and still be stuck. So obviously the best solution is prevent it in the first place.
Dr. Bender?
So I assume this is one of those things that should be acted on sooner than later? Is that,
Absolutely. I would have done this 2 years ago if I could have put it all together that quickly.
so I guess would ask Ms. Peters a quick question too. I know that everything's challenging on the budget, but is this something else we might want to consider with your guys' recommendations, moving to the action agenda so you can get started on it now as opposed to waiting? Or Ms. Exline?
I think the sooner we take action on this, the better off we are, because we do not want to be in a situation where we're on the back end of this on defense rather than offense. So I really do think that we probably need to move on this as soon as you are comfortable doing so. With that said, this will come out of Dwight's budget. And so, you know, we do have money to pay for it. He has a long-range plan for how he can use his finances because, you know, you saw the price tag, but I think the risk way outweighs the price of us getting ahead of this so that we can continue to provide quality education to students.
The other thing I didn't mention is, as of right now, our insurance company is not requiring this service, but they're implying to me that within 1 year, the next year, it will be a required service. We either have to provide it ourselves or contract it, so.
I know just enough about this to be dangerous, so that, I don't understand, but that's true at my employer as well. I mean, the higher education institutions are facing the same changes in insurance. So frankly, folks, for my part, I don't know that I'm gonna learn anything more in the next month. I see lots of head shaking, so with that.
If you have any questions you want me to bring back, I've got some other information here if there's any questions you want to ask, so feel free.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we move Mr. Christie's presentation from the discussion agenda to the action agenda and approve the dollar amounts he's noted here at the bottom of his report so that we can move forward with protection for the USD 305.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Further discussion, the only thing I might throw out there is that this does come from capital outlay, is my understanding correct?
Yes, it does.
So it's funds that aren't tied to salaries or any of those other things that we just talked about. It's budgeted funds, just like building maintenance and those things.
Right, this would be a different budget. This would not be out of the general fund that Mrs. Peters was talking about earlier. This is the capital outlay fund that is meant for capital projects, technology expenditures, but not salaries.
I just did a little division, and it looks like it's about $30 a student. If we were just counting the students, it'd be less than that, maybe 32. But if we were also counting the staff, it's less than that per person, so.
I didn't even do that math, so thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Christie. I know we've got Mr. Upson on his way up, but we've been going for a little bit. I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute recess. So we'll come back into session at 7:23.
Good evening. Okay, we talked at the tail end of Dwight's presentation about capital outlay, and capital improvement dollars, and so we're gonna talk about the capital improvement plan, which is the plan to expend capital outlay dollars. On the agenda is a review of the fiscal year 22 capital outlay plan and kind of where we're at with that. And we'll get into the fiscal year 23 proposed projects, and we'll talk about something that's fairly unique to this district, which is our set-aside accounts or our capital outlay savings accounts that allow us to be able to afford things that happen that tend to cost a lot of money. And so we, rather than try to pass bonds all the time, we save for those so that we can replace a roof, for example, that might cost $1 million. And we don't have to worry about that because we've saved over time for that. Okay, review of a fiscal year 22. We had 26 completed or underway projects, and that's 15 that are complete or done, and 11 that are underway right now. As I don't want to make it an excuse, but COVID's a challenge and been a challenge for all sorts of things, and it's been a challenge for equipment and construction and timing of all that. Hold, please. So this slide is some highlights of the projects from fiscal year 22. It labeled on here, not all the projects. In your packet, you have the fiscal year 23 proposed plan, and it has a full list of all the projects that we have completed or are underway. Of note, the warehouse is complete. New warehouse that was on last year or a year before that, rather, for approval, it is complete, and we have a temporary certificate of occupancy for that. We are beginning roofs actually this week, replacement of roofs at Hageman and Hughesner as well. Flooring projects have been a significant challenge. We are finished with about half of them, and the other half will begin. We've got a few that'll finish up over spring break, and then the remainder will be finished this summer. We've replaced all the furnaces at Stewart, which was kind of a new development. Remember the cold snap that we had? We discovered that we had our vision was to replace rooftop units, and that's kind of the direction we thought we were going. And with the cold, really extreme cold that we had, we discovered we had problems that weren't really apparent until that happened with some of our buildings that have furnaces. And so that's a great addition of new furnaces at Stewart. We provided electronic entry control at Heartland and Salina Education Center. And we've been working on pre-K playgrounds with the movement of pre-K classrooms into all of our grade schools. We've added specific pre-K playgrounds to those facilities. And then the athletic directors spoke about advertising dollars. We did complete digital advertising, digital signage in our high school gyms, and those are up and obviously underway, and they're bringing in advertising dollars. So we'll talk briefly about priorities. These have not changed for several years. I try to boil it down into the basics. Our priority is safety of students and staff, and projects will rise to the top if there's a safety issue. Protection of district assets is the second priority. Oftentimes a small problem today ends up a huge problem tomorrow, and that's kind of one of our mantras, is that we focus our efforts that way. Delivery of program is number 3. Now this is all a little odd because I'm the odd one. That delivery of program is actually 3rd, because my job is to support, and we need the facilities and we need people to be safe in order to make that happen. So that's 3rd on our list, and then aesthetics is 4th. The fiscal year 23 summary. And I'm going to go through each individual category and go into detail about what those projects are. So tech hardware, and these are in kind of budget order. New this year, we've added the tech, what we had historically called the tech plan. We added that to the capital improvement plan so that you all are reviewing the total plan that includes it's all capital outlay dollars. And in the past, it's kind of been two separate actions that have happened. And rather than do that, we put it all together. The budget, if you look at last year, the budget this year is much different because now it includes the tech planning piece. And that can get really expensive from year to year. When we, for example, this year are planning on teacher and administrator laptop replacements, that's $1.5 million when we, every 5 years when we do that. So that's on there this year, budgeted for, saved for. And then our freshman Chromebooks, what I call our freshman Chromebooks, but every year, as you might recall, the seniors are offered the option of taking their Chromebook with them when they leave. They are basically at end of life at that point anyways, and we replenish those Chromebooks for freshmen, so they all get a new Chromebook when they're on their freshman, first day freshman year. That's a $500,000 deal every year that we do that. That supports the one-to-one, and Dwight's got it all worked out to where we have Chromebooks across the board. Not all seniors take theirs, and we end up with loaners, and we end up being able to make that work. But the bottom line is it's $500,000 a year for Chromebooks to keep us going. Special projects, 2 special projects coming up. One we've talked about, one we have not. The new South High tennis courts at Jerry Ivy. That property now belongs to us, and part of our agreement with the Tennis Alliance and the City of Salina was that we were going to update and improve those facilities there. In exchange, they were going to become ours. And so we have $1 million budgeted. The goal there is 8 new courts at that Ivy property, and we're hoping to have those underway at the end of the season, at the end of the spring season, and ready for the fall season. That's pretty ambitious. Remember I said COVID and supply chain issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My hope is that we can leverage what the Tennis Alliance has going right now at Oakdale with contractors already coming from out of town to do that we can get this going and leverage technical folks being in town already to maybe get better pricing and make that happen. Second on the list is LED stadium lights. The light fixtures at the stadium are at end of life, and they're metal halide lights, which I don't think anybody ever thought would ever go away. They've been around a long, long time, that technology. Well, obviously LED is the new technology. It will cut our energy usage and bill in half and provide substantially better lighting there. For example, we always have at least one of those bulbs out. There's 24 bulbs out there, and they look small from the ground, but I promise you they're not. You got to wheel them around in a cart. They're huge light bulbs. We always have at least one bulb that's out, and it costs about $2,000 to get a crane and get up there and change that thing. Well, that was great, but now we can't even find the light bulbs. You got to look on eBay to get a light bulb for that thing. And so it's a big challenge, and we end up with real trouble if we have multiple lights out and we've got dark spots on the field and we're trying to do competitions, and let's say we've got 4A state championships there, it becomes a huge problem. So this project would replace those with LED lights, which are guaranteed replaced from the manufacturer, which means they get the crane and they replace them for 10 years. So you really can't lose with a project like that. Next is concrete. This is a new one as well. The parking lot at South High School And my bet is that within 5 years, it'll be the parking lot at Lakewood or the parking lot at Central High. It really needs to be replaced. Most of our parking lots are asphalt, which is is a temporary, it sounds crazy because we all think of it as a very permanent thing, but asphalt is a temporary surface that requires a lot of maintenance. And some of that maintenance has happened and some of it hasn't. And the bottom line is that parking lot's at end of life and I would like to replace it. I've budgeted for concrete, and it could well be that by the time this thing is ready to go out to bid, that concrete is actually cheaper than asphalt. With oil being a main ingredient in asphalt and obviously gas prices, that's all connected. Concrete would be great, is great because it is substantially more durable than asphalt. It requires way less maintenance and will last a lot longer. Next, remember these are in budget order. So next is tech contracts. Dwight talked about Arctic Wolf that you approved. Arctic Wolf is included in this number. These are all the contracts and services that MIS obtains that help us keep going. Some of the things that are on here, the multi-form authentication, which is kind of a new bit of security. That contract is one of the ones that we do. Malware and virus protection, Microsoft licensing, backup and restore services, network storage, internet bandwidth, web page publishing, cybersecurity monitoring, which is the Arctic Wolf, and there's more to that list. Furniture, I'm looking at replacing lunchroom furniture district-wide, and rather than try to eat that elephant in 1 year, we're gonna try to eat it in 3 years. So this is the first installment of new lunchroom furniture. The lunchroom furniture that we have currently are the kind of A-frame lunchroom tables. You can pick them up and they snap together and you roll them around. You might have seen them around vertically. Who'd have thunk? But when a guy does that for 15 years, he starts to break. Not the table, but the man. The tables are worn out and they're starting to wear out our people. Remember, safety of people was one of my top priorities. And it's time to replace those with something that's less hard on the human body. And in so doing, I think we can do something that's better for students as well. And so that's what we're attempting to do, create a lot more flexibility with that furniture than what we have with a traditional lunchroom table, which is pretty much relegated to little kids eating lunch. Well, I think we found an option that allows us to have a variety of different types of seating with some convertible furniture that exists. That's what this project is. Safety and building security, we'd like to do electronic entry control at Hageman, and that will be the final facility for us to put all of our facilities on the Johnson Controls entry control system that we have district-wide. That's the last building. And then we'd like to replace the intercom at Lakewood. That intercom system is at end of life. Others will be coming due shortly and at end of life, and it's a functional system, but we can no longer get parts for it. And that system is integral to the life safety system of the building. So when that thing doesn't work right, it's a huge safety issue for us because it's integrated into the building safety plan on how they use that system. So we would like to replace that with a new system. Equipment, we're looking at 3 grounds maintenance vehicles for Central, Lakewood, and South Middle, and a new walk-in freezer at Kitchen 2. And the last couple of years have changed the game. They've changed the circumstances. Bottom line is we need food service to be able to buy a lot of food, because tomorrow they might not be able to get any food. And we need to have reliable storage for that food so that when they can get it, and this would allow them to stock more days worth of food than what they can currently. And that helps them absorb the fluctuations in the market right now, which I think we need that to provide services for kids. HVAC, this is a set aside, and this is in keeping with our HVAC manager's long-range plan for the replacement of rooftop units at the board office, one at Central High, one at the Salina Education Center, and then there's those furnace replacements again, one for Heartland and 8 for Meadowlark. Vehicles, we're continuing with 2 fleet vehicles a year replacement. Building improvements, we have window replacements have been on the capital improvement plan for several years for the Salina Education Center. And restroom renovations, this is a, I consider it a trial project. We've got a lot of 1950s and 1960s bathrooms, and they're not often seen. They're there and students are using them, but you go through our grade schools and you find these bathrooms that haven't been touched. Now, it's a testimony to the construction of the 50s and 60s that they're bulletproof and they remain. They're not very easy to work on, and they're look like 90s, 50s, and 60s bathrooms. So this is a trial project to see what we can afford, what we can do with some of those bathrooms, and kind of get a game plan for future bathroom renovations to bring those bathrooms into the century. And finally, playgrounds. With the changes in Opportunity Now coming next year, bringing in grade school kids into that program, they don't have a playground over there. It's middle school and high school kids right now, and we last year did a hard surface out there, like a basketball court, which was sufficient for what the middle school and high school students needed. But we need to have a playground. And if you got a playground, you probably need to have a fence as well. And so this project would provide both of those for the Salina West campus, where Opportunity Now is currently housed. Okay, set aside balances. This is a chart showing the set aside balances. Of note, our turf, I think it was this year that we changed our turf allocation each year, what we set aside each year, and we did that because of the softball fields and the turf we had at the softball fields at South High. So we have $500,000 a year going to technology, $300,000 to roofing, $150,000 to HVAC, and $140,000 to turf. And then if you look at the chart there, you can see what the balances are currently. That was a lot, and I hope you don't approve it, Mark, right now. This is the first reading, and it's meant to be digested, and I welcome any questions you might have right now, and certainly over the next month. He said, do it.
I appreciate the good humor, but no, I remarked to Mrs. Exline that once a month we get to review the check allocation, and I'm just always amazed how much it takes to run the district. And there's 100 pages of entries for what it takes to, and this is, my reaction to this is similar. There's so many details that you just don't think about when you're trying to run a school system that has 17 buildings. I'm probably forgetting some of the ones that aren't housing students and so forth, but I'd appreciate the attention to detail that you and your team have put into these things. And I agree we should not approve anything today, but there's just a lot of thought that's gone into it. Some of you know my father-in-law has been on the school board in Anderson County for 34 years. And I know they don't have as many buildings, but I know they don't get this level of detail. So I really appreciate the work and the information that's out there. Again, not just for us, but I think it's valuable for the public to see all these things. I mean, when the windstorm came and the roof came off Schilling, if y'all hadn't planned, that could have been devastating financially, but the funds were there that you've just talked about. And things like that are gonna happen. The furnaces at Stewart that you mentioned in there, nothing lasts forever, except apparently the 1950s bathrooms, but but those aren't handicap accessible probably in the right way either, so how to handle all those things. So just so many details, and I don't know that I have any questions today, but I just want to comment on it. There's just so many details, and the team working on these things is just, it's very well done.
It's an entire, minus overnight sleeping, it is its own organism. I mean, we feed, we have facilities, we have transportation, we have utilities, everything that goes into that. It's its own, almost like its own city. And I don't recommend that we get into housing kids overnight, because that's a whole nother thing. But
some of your custodians are in there most of the night, so.
I'm saying sleeping, because we are going 24 hours a day, just about. With activities or custodial, there's some operation going on just about 24 hours a day, yes.
You know, we talk a lot, or I talk a lot, I should say, about the activities and the custodians and all the moving pieces that are out there. But I don't know that we get to publicly thank you enough, Mr. Upson. We go around the state and we talk to other school districts, and the level of detail, the level of planning, the level of foresight that you've put into the plan, the level of planning for the future, not only financially, but also with equipment. Other districts wish they had the opportunity to do that. So that's an asset in and of itself to our district. I want to thank you for.
I appreciate that. I will tell you that it is 100% a collaborative effort. And I walked in, I'm one of the lucky ones. I walked in to a district that had a executive director of business that is serious about everything. And one of them, I can't do my job without resources to do it. So it's a lot easier for me to do it when there's resources, and there's already been a history of, we set aside and we plan for these things. You go do what you think you need to do, Chris Upson. But we've planned financially to let you make those decisions, and that's made it a lot easier. But thank you.
I think it's very important because our community has put a lot of resources into, the last bond project we did was a huge chunk for our community. And the fact that we're committed to maintaining those things and we're not taking out a bond project to replace air conditioning and things like that is tremendous. So, thank you.
Once you're ready to unveil, I'd like to take a tour of the warehouse.
Absolutely.
I'll call you up
Anytime.
someday.
Yep, anytime. It's not very flashy, but it it'll serve the purpose.
Okay, well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We appreciate the update. Next, we have Ms. Tiffany Lowe to discuss the Equity Council. And by the way, we approved the personnel report earlier, so I'll say congratulations in
Thank
public.
you. So now I don't have to say pending board approval. Thank you. I'm here tonight to just talk with you a little bit about proposed changes to our Equity Council bylaws. We have had our Equity Council now for 4 years. There was a lot of thought and strategic planning put into these initial bylaws. But one of the requirements within the bylaws, and I'll point that out here in just a second, is that we do review it as a council. And then I was put in charge to bring to you some proposed changes that we would just recommend right now. So I'm going to dig into where those are. So I'm going to have those up on the screen here. The very first change, just a second. The very first change you'll see is in section 3. And it's A3, and it's the general responsibilities for the council itself. As it's written, it says review data on equity and make recommendations to the executive team and USD 305 Board of Education. What the council would like that to be changed to is to strike out USD 305 Board of Education and instead put the superintendent or his or her designee. The his or her designee was recommended because it would be consistent throughout, when identifying the superintendent, it'd be consistent throughout the document. The next change, and I actually want to point this section out as well, you'll see that in section 5, that is where we talk a little bit about just reviewing the bylaws itself, and then any amendments or recommendations we do have to go ahead and vote on as a council. So these changes were 100% of the members that were there that day agreed to the changes that they would like to bring forward to you. That is on section 5A3. We go ahead and strike out the USD 305 Board of Education shall approve all amendments. If you would, after this recommendation, going ahead and striking that part out. And then in section 6B, changing what is, I don't know that I'm saying striked out. What is taken out is the team, executive directors, and the Board of Education, and then change that to executive team and the superintendent. And it seems a little redundant to change it to executive team, but that would be consistent wording throughout the whole document then, instead of how it was written of team and then parentheses executive directors, which is why the council felt like we should go ahead and put consistent wording throughout there. And then go ahead and strike out C on 6, that just talks directly about the district's executive leadership team will have the responsibility of implementation once the USD 305 Board of Education approves the recommendations. So I want to just talk briefly about the reason for that. Truly, or reason for the changes, truly, as our council talks, and like I said, this council's been put together for 4 years now. The membership has changed and that sort of thing. The changes that we're proposing really is more of how we're truly functioning now. As a council, we really are working, Superintendent Exline sits on the council with us, and we really are working through her to make the recommendations that then are implemented within our school buildings. And so these changes really just reflect truly how the council is functioning collectively. The recommendations really do go through her. She could still do some reporting to you, but she would be the one that then would roll things out to the buildings and that sort of thing. We, I think, are welcome, both of us are welcome to any questions that you might have, but I wanted to just bring this forward to you tonight to see what your thoughts were as well.
I appreciate that. I think, and I wish Mr. Grant was here this evening, I think something that I've had some conversation about looking through this is, I think it's great that we get an opportunity to discuss this a little bit, because this board was not part of this process in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is important that we continue to revisit that and think through some things there and chew that up and make, clear the direction we're going. What questions, comments, things like that? Ms. Zimmerman?
I'm on the Equity Council, so I was in on the discussion, but the council keeps Ms. Exline informed about everything that's happening, and she's part of the discussion. And so if the council reports to her, then becomes her job to report to us, which she keeps us well informed of everything all the time. And so it's not like we're cutting the board out of the process, just that the council then will be able to report to her and won't have to wait a month till the next board meeting to approve something if they want to get something done. And Ms. Exline will keep the board informed of what's happening. Seem to make it a little more nimble.
And the council members report a lot that they would like that flexibility. We've heard that kind of repeatedly through, and I think just through changes in different things that have happened through COVID, that sort of thing, they would like some of that flexibility. So they kind of saw that truly showing how the council is truly functioning would be appropriate anyway, but then also making sure that they could have some of that flexibility too.
Since I'm new, have you been communicating with the school board over these past 4 years as then? And is that working well, or it wasn't, or?
Pretty much we've done updates, and I'm gonna let Mrs. Exline jump in here too. We've done updates on things that we have done, but we've generally gone through her.
Yeah, there have been a couple times where there have been presentations to the board, but they've all been to update the bylaws. So most of the work that we've done has been done more at the administrative level because it isn't policy. It's procedure, it's management, and as the work of the board is defined, the board is to set policy, administration's to implement. And so really the work of the Equity Council is more about the day-to-day operations and how we make the experience better for students and for staff and for our families. And so when the reporting has happened to the board, it truly has been like what you're getting tonight. We want to update the bylaws. Now, there are some of the belonging work was in response to some conversations that we had in the committee, but that wasn't something that the board decided to do. It's something that administratively we decided to move forward, and then we're keeping the board informed. Does that answer your question?
I guess. So the board is informed, like, are the minutes sent to us then with each meeting?
Well, the minutes to date have been on the USD 305 website.
Okay, because I know I got minutes from the Smoky Hill. I mean, I'm getting minutes from other organizations, so I was just wondering if those aren't emailed, those are actually, if we want to see them, we go to
Right.
the website and
Yeah.
look at those.
What this would in effect do is it would make the Equity Council function more like a site council. And so what that means then is that they become a recommendation body, looking at data, looking at the experience of students, looking at individual issues, and then making recommendations. So they would function more like a school site council than a recommendation body to the board, which is how they've been functioning, really. Anne is there is a board member on the Equity Council. That is in the bylaws, and so Anne has been the one that has been serving. And so between Anne and I, we would do reports to the board like would happen on any other committee to make sure that the board was updated on anything that was happening.
So you will give us the recommendations that you're placing in the schools then? No? Or
It would
probably
no longer take board action
Okay.
and right now it doesn't take board action. It would be a situation where I'm trying to figure out how to explain this to you. It would be a situation where the recommendations from the council would be made to administration. So one of the things that we've talked about is it might be good for me to have small groups with students to better understand me listening directly to students. So that might be something that I implement as a result. And then I would keep you informed that this is something that we're starting to do, just like I do with any other initiative in the district. But the board would not be deciding whether or not I was going to have small groups with the students because that's not policy.
Okay.
It's more procedure.
I will say that the minutes of the Equity Council are really pretty boring. It's sort of like, they discussed chapter 3, and then the meeting was adjourned. I mean, that's kind of the level of detail that and we do a lot of things in small groups, so like a group of 3, and that doesn't make it all into the minutes. We just discuss. And so every now and then, they have come up with training processes, but actually, I don't think we came up with those right in the Equity Council meeting. But maybe we did, I just don't remember.
We've vetted through resources with the council, and then they make recommendations.
Right.
But truly, again, what happened there was that we then implemented those in, much like a site council, what Mrs. Exline described, We then implemented those with their insight, into the buildings 2 years ago.
So we would look at several different articles.
Yes.
About equity issues, and we'd say, does this seem like a good one that staff would appreciate, or does this seem really dull, or does this seem like on the wrong track? And so everybody kind of gets to vote on if it's a good article to use in training. Yeah, that was a couple years ago, or.
And then those recommendations, are they put in the minutes then?
That is just a vote, so I think you guys took those votes and processed them after the meeting, so they would have said the council got to give their opinion on articles, but I don't think we got into any details.
I would say no, that wouldn't make it into the minutes. It would be more like any other committee that I deal with. So the calendar committee, I didn't have minutes of the calendar committee of every single thing that we talked about to present to you. But I presented to you here, here's, in that instance, here's the recommendation from the calendar committee. Our site councils meet on a regular basis, and we don't present the minutes to you of the site councils and what they're recommending to the principal. It would function more like that.
So would you like you say the calendar of meetings will be posted, so that's still going to be happening though, right? Because it wouldn't be like a site council then? Because you do have minutes and you post them on the USD website, right?
Right, but if they are reporting to me and not to you,
Right.
this is no longer subject to open meetings laws.
Okay, I was just
And-
wondering, because the site council had,
Right.
didn't have any minutes, but this one does have minutes, so I was just kind of
Right, and
hitting
so
that.
this would be more of a group that would be working on current issues, discussing current issues, and making recommendations to me. Some of those I might implement, and others I might not, and we'd have a really frank conversation about why is that maybe not doable right now. And so it really gives us more flexibility. The goal is, right now, in order for us to have a meeting, we have to do public notice. And so if something comes up that I want to get input on, we aren't flexible enough for me to be able to do that because of the way the bylaws are set up. And the way the bylaws are set up is not really the way the Equity Council is functioning. And if we would have the bylaws reflect how we're really functioning, it would allow us to do what I just described. It would allow me and maybe several other members to meet with groups of students. Maybe Mrs. Rector meets with the community members that are on there. Maybe Mrs. Lowe meets with the teachers that are on there and talks about what's happening in schools. It just allows us more flexibility.
I'll add one more thing that I realized we didn't vote on these things because by the bylaws, we're a consensus group. So we discussed who thought what about different articles, but we didn't have a vote. So the vote wouldn't be in the minutes because we didn't exactly have a vote. I'm sorry to misspeak.
One question, who's the executive team?
The executive team is the people that are to your right.
I see. Okay, you got another label, don't you? Okay. Well, it looks like most of the changes is just with the school board. And not anything, other changes are made, even though okay.
I think, just thinking through different conversations I've had and things like that, one piece or one thing that I've heard is that maybe the group is so big that it's hard to build consensus, that it's hard to figure out traction. And I guess as I've thought of it, does it, and I know we're talking about, building ground where people can hear each other out, but I guess I look at the groups that are involved and I almost wonder if they wouldn't be better heard in segments, for example, students and community and staff versus blending. I'm interested in people who've been in those meetings, that conversation, just some information there.
Yes, and then there has been several conversations about in fact, our last conversation was that they would prefer to be able to do it in smaller groupings, but currently with how things are written with open records, or open meetings, we really can't do that because we would have to, if a certain number of us would get together to do, and you'll see in the bylaws, there is committee work that's noted, and the group has repeatedly told us that we would like to do some committee work, but the disadvantage with that is that you cannot form those committees unless you notice the public, you have an open meeting, but the public is allowed to come, we have minutes for that meeting. So it's been difficult to navigate those, that piece of it, but very much we have been told, in fact, exactly what Mrs. Exline talked about, a student group as a listening session, or me specifically working with the teachers, or Mrs. Richter specifically working with just the at-large members to kind of seek input in that way. With how things are written right now, we would not be able to allow us to do that, but these changes would allow for that flexibility and the council to really have more autonomy to what those groups could look like and then what we could get accomplished during that time.
I do think the size of the group can be a barrier to discussion.
Yes.
I think when some of the issues that we need to tackle are challenging, and being able to talk and really understand where you're coming from and where I'm coming from is important. And so when we're all here, there are a lot of us, and I think sometimes then voices aren't heard. And I think that we don't want to assume consensus in some of the conversations that we're having. And so trying to figure out how do we make sure that we're really hearing the voices and we're really getting meaningful input in a group this size, that is a challenge.
And the minutes themselves, there's lots of reassurance that I did not quote Tiffany Lowe as saying blah, 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 because it does make members not want to be as vulnerable because what will be reflected, which is kind of what you spoke to. The reason things are more generic is because we really need to protect our members too, especially if they're willing to engage in very vulnerable and sometimes very personal conversations.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking a group of students would communicate probably a little on a different level than
Yes.
a group of students in a room full of 20 people.
Correct.
And I guess I don't want to lose sight of, when I think of the goal of this, I think of, I go back to the non-discrimination statement we have.
Yes.
And I think of, in my mind, this is our way of understanding that the folks in our community are not feeling that. Would that be fair? I mean, that's my understanding. And I'm interested in, I guess, conversation and input from the rest of our board on these things.
Well, I feel like, as has been mentioned, the Equity Council's only existed for 4 years. And if I'm correct, part of that is because of state recommendations. I'm not sure if it's mandates, but state recommendations that these things exist. So we're trying to be cognizant of state things, but trying to do what's best for the community as well. And it's difficult topics, there's no doubt about it. So I appreciate the fact that, hey, we've tried something for 4 years, parts of it have worked, maybe parts of it haven't. Now we have a recommendation to consider going forward. And I think that's a good way to keep on trying to do what's best for students and the overall community. For better or for worse, the world's changed. There's no doubt about it. There's things that 30 years ago when I was in high school, they didn't exist. They weren't part of the vernacular. Now they are. And diversity, equity, and inclusion issues are important for all districts to discuss and to make sure we are being as equitable as possible for all people. So I think this group is doing the right things to make recommendations and make adjustments that allow it to be as functional as possible.
I can't even remember a time when we voted on anything. I mean, I think that we haven't, right?
you
So
haven't.
it's not, we're not taking something away because we haven't been doing that. This feels like it's part of our committees that we're on, where I don't come to you and ask your opinion or what's happening. It's already been a meeting and I'm just telling you what's happened. So it makes sense to me.
So you mentioned that it's still an open meeting then, or it isn't an open meeting?
I might have to defer on some of that, but I think it would change the dynamic.
It would no longer be an open meeting because they don't make recommendations directly to the board.
Okay. And that's why the board are kind of.
Right, yeah, good
being
question,
ever-
because that is, that's one of the finer details. Any group that reports directly to the board would be subject to the sunshine laws, the open meeting laws. Any group that does not report directly to the board is not subject. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't still share information with the board, like what Dana just described. You know, you come back from your committee meetings at the Rec Commission or at Smoky Hill Education Service Center or at Heartland, and you report to the board about your committee assignments. And so it would feel similar to that, but the committee itself would no longer be subject to open meeting laws.
Okay. So then, like, every board meeting will have a report or not from the Equity Council as far as what recommendations you're making, or?
Ann's actually done that the whole time I've been on the board. Almost every one of her member presentations talks about things she's done with the Equity Council.
Same thing would be. I will say that, honestly, the Equity Council discusses very sensitive topics for people that in their own identity are objectionable to some people. And for them to express their actual experience in living their lives and working and being students in our schools is a very sensitive thing, and if they feel like they're going to be attacked by somebody because they admitted these things, they are not going to talk. And then we can't do our job of making sure that everybody feels like they belong. So that's one valuable part of not having to speak to the public when you're at these meetings.
I just have one more question. So at the meetings, you have like testimonies or things like that? Or I kind of thought the council was to meet and do recommendations to help, these marginalized groups. And so, but the meetings, you actually have people actually come and share? Is that what you're saying?
Members of the council identify in various ways their races, their gender identity, their ethnicity, their religion, and that's how we know what's going on in the school, because we talk about it. And we can't, we could make recommendations if we were all white females, but we wouldn't have a very authentic picture of what's actually going on in the schools. So since all the people in the schools are not straight white females, we have other people that are on the Equity Council too. So there are people that we discuss our personal experiences, and not like a testimony. It's just a discussion of how, when you have felt like you didn't belong. I have had experiences where I didn't belong, not in the Salina Public Schools particularly, but those are the kind of things we sometimes discuss, and we've tried to figure out ways to make it so everybody belongs.
I would agree with what Ann said. I think what is beautiful about this committee is that everybody comes with a very different personal experience and a very different personal story. And I think in any room you have that. And I would venture to guess that my lived experience is very different than Mark's and is very different than Scott's, because we're just three different people, and the same experience could feel very different to us. So it really is about us trying to understand someone else's perspective, how things are impacting them, how conversations are impacting them, how we can make them feel more welcome and included in our school community. which then translates to how do we make our students feel more welcome and included in our school community and increase that sense of belonging, which is, you know, what we really have set out to do in our mission and vision.
So I'm assuming that a member at large might be a parent, and they might have share an experience that happened to them as a child that they'd like to not see repeated. So that's being vulnerable. I mean, that's what I get from that
Yes.
they may not want to share that otherwise,
Yes.
right?
Or to their student.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or it may be a student that wants to share a story. Because we do have student representatives on the council as well. Right now, we just have one per school.
So it looks like on your membership, there's 4 students on the council?
I
Or do you-
misspoke, we have two from each high school. I was thinking we had middle school because we talked about that at the last meeting. 2 from each high school.
Okay, and those probably change every year, probably.
Right now, the students are not participating because it's not a safe place to do so.
I see. Because it's an open meeting, is that what you're saying, or not? Or I don't
was
think you
gonna
asked.
ask if you could
Yes.
expand on that,
Okay,
please.
okay.
And I'll expand a little bit more. I am usually the one that talks with school counselors, with principals about who would be a good recommendation, who is somebody that's interested. We have teachers that can give recommendations, and it is very difficult because of the open meetings, because the public is there. Our students do not feel safe sharing their story there. They don't feel safe talking about, they just don't feel safe being vulnerable, and I will not put a student in that situation. So we have really been unable to fill those spaces.
I appreciate you saying that you wouldn't, because I would not want you to.
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay, I have a question, as well as so they do come and share, are their parents along with them, or do they just come by themselves to do this?
So before I would ever talk with a student themselves, I would talk with their parents.
Okay.
Their parents would tell me, yep, this was a good situation. I would point them to the resources on our website. I would tell them the history of the council in complete transparency. I would talk to them about all of those things. And there have been times in the past year where parents are not interested in their child being a part of it. There are other times when they're interested in their child being a part of it, but the child is not interested. And so it just has become just not a good environment to subject our children to. Students, I guess, they wouldn't appreciate being high school kids and me calling them a child.
One thought I have as I scroll through this, how many councils per se do we have, Ms. Exline, that would report to the superintendent that have bylaws?
There would be one, and it would be this one, if we leave these bylaws intact. We don't have other councils that have bylaws. We have more of committees, small work groups, but as far as bylaws that report directly to me, I mean, councils that have bylaws that report directly to me, this would be the only one.
I think to be a council, I think we've modeled this after the Topeka Equity Council originally, and they had bylaws, so we have bylaws. I think that's how this happened. I wasn't on it originally, but, and maybe to be an open meeting council, they have to have bylaws? I don't know that, but I think we were modeled after Topeka, and that's how we got bylaws in the first place.
I think that Shanna actually visited Topeka and when they went to observe that meeting. And their council functions very differently than ours does. They do have bylaws, but their council actually is staff. It's not a community council. Shanna, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I will. So when the council was formed, it really was to be able to hear the voices of individuals, of our building representatives, and also our members at large. And so our council really was about hearing from that community and hearing from our schools. When we went and visited the Topeka Council, it was mainly administrators, and they were looking at things from a very data-driven aspect. And so there wasn't a community presence, there wasn't a student presence. It really was a council of administrators. And so I think that's where maybe those bylaws were in place, because those administrators were speaking directly to the board. And in our council, it really was from the very beginning to be a mechanism to be able to hear what is happening in our schools, so that way we could be reactive to the needs of our students and also our staff.
Besides the students, are there other areas that aren't filled? I mean, are at large or that kind of stuff?
So there are rules, and I think that part of the membership, one of the sections talk about you can't miss more than 3 consecutive meetings. That has been a little bit harder to gauge over COVID, because it was difficult for us to even have meetings during that time frame, because we didn't necessarily do Zoom, because we needed to do it openly, but we had members that were not uncomfortable due to COVID. So yes, and some of that was due to just the climate we were in last year, and honestly, some of it this year is just due to the climate that they do not feel comfortable in the open meeting as well.
We do have a representative assigned from each building. Some of our building representatives come every single time, and others, the attendance is much more intermittent. For probably a myriad of reasons. But we have a core that is very committed to being there every single time, and that schedules allow that to happen. And I would say a pretty solid core of people that are regular attendance. We have really struggled with student representation over the time that I've been on the council, over the last 3 years. We've really struggled there, having consistent student attendance, and this year having any student attendance.
I know I've been on a bit of a roll tonight, moving things from the discussion agenda to the action agenda, but I may continue that trend here. And my thought process right now, and Ms. Lowe, I appreciate your thoughts in response to this. The goal here, again, after reviewing 4 years of work, is to try and make this council much more functional for service to students and the overall community. And the recommendations you've made up here remove some of the barriers for functionality of this overall council.
Yes.
I wonder, Ms. Zimmerman, too, we've talked a lot about the bylaws pieces of this. Is there any merit to be gained perhaps by further structuring this to take out bylaws entirely and maybe making this so it's just a council that meets overall needs? So I guess there's several questions here, and perhaps I'm rambling on needlessly, so feel free to ask me questions of what my intent is here. But I personally have no problem with potentially making a motion to go ahead and adopt the recommendation you're talking about. But do we need to go a step further before you think that happens?
I would, just representing the council, and I would love for you guys to weigh into being in that meeting. I would appreciate if you felt the urge to make the recommendations, to be okay with the recommendations we brought forward. I think it would give the council autonomy to be able to then relook at the bylaws as a council group. I don't want the council to feel like we just have nothing now. But I think that if we just kind of eliminate some of the sections that we are looking at eliminating, it would actually allow the council then to, by themselves, organically look at the bylaws and be able, and have the flexibility to be able to make the changes that they feel like that is needed. I mean, anything that you, and even Shanna that sit on the council, I just would hate for our council members, as I'm trying to just bring this to you as recommendation, to completely change things.
If I could just, I remember being a part of the board that said, yeah, we need to have an equity council because of issues that were, I think, challenges, things that were going on in the district. And there were obviously people in the community, students in the schools, staff members who felt like they needed a place to be heard. I don't know that that's gone away in any maybe even grown at times. If I have a challenge, I just wonder if the structure, the way it is, allows us to do that. And I wonder if maybe we've stalled too long on not addressing that. And truly identifying what the goal of this conversation is. I mean, I look at the goal that's in the bylaws, and I wonder if we are accomplishing that through the method that we have in place now. I do agree also that we've got a lot of people who've invested a lot in this, and ripping it out from under them is not, probably, I think if, in my mind, I almost need to just think on this for a while and really ponder it and have conversations and understand things and think on it, I guess is where I'm at.
I guess I would say that if we approve the changes in the bylaws, then the council is free to make the bylaws whatever they want and report it to the superintendent. I don't think they would disband. I think but they probably would. There are a lot of people that are frustrated with slow movement on the council.
Jim, I very much appreciate your thoughts as always, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. Again, this group has been working for 4 years. They've come forward tonight with recommendations that these things aren't working. Here's a way to make them work so we can better serve the community. And if the majority feel like waiting another month to discuss these things before we move any further is a benefit, great. But my thought currently is this large group has come forward with these recommendations. They've been in the trenches working on these things. I see no reason to delay further. That's which would I would be comfortable making a motion, but I don't want to do that until you or others feel somewhat comfortable that way.
I would like to think about it, just like what Jim said, just to look at it a little bit more and have some more questions.
And I would prefer to move forward. So I'm going to make a motion. I don't know if it will be enough to pass, but I move that we make the changes in the Equity Council bylaws that are proposed here.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And I hate to call anyone out, but Scott, I'm interested in your input if you have any. I know this is, I haven't heard from you, and I value your opinion as well.
I'm in agreement with Dr. Bandry. I think if the intent is what's important and the members are saying that we're not able to meet that intent, then we have to make a change based upon their recommendations. Now, that doesn't necessarily do away with everything, but if it will allow them to further achieve their objective, then I'm in agreement with that. And then if there's anything that needs to happen in addition to that, I would trust that Superintendent Exline would bring that forward.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda this evening is textbooks and instructional materials with Ms. Rector.
Yes, I just want to update you from when I spoke last time to identify where we are at in the process. I did go over the textbooks and instructional materials process in regards to if there was a challenge for any materials, and we did have a challenge that, if you remember, or you probably saw that on March 1st, we had a media release in regards to a challenge book that we had in our library. And so that challenge went through the building level committee. And so a decision was made for the book to stay within our library. And at that end of that process, then that information was then provided to the complainants. And so those complainants then would have 10 days where they could provide notification to us that they wanted to take it to a second level appeal. We have had notification by 2 patrons that they do want to take it to the second level appeal. And so what that means is that we will have a district-wide committee that will be appointed. And so we have the 5 days to get that appointment made of that committee. And then that committee will have 15 school days to be able to make a decision. They will go through the same process similar to what the building committee went through, where they will read the book in its entirety and then make a decision. That decision will be put into a report that will go to the complainant and then to the superintendent.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Rector. Okay, the next item we have on our agenda is school board reports and upcoming dates of importance. We do have on March 22nd our boardsmanship training that will be held here at 5:30. Our Teacher of the Year virtual celebration on March 26th. The Master Teacher ceremony on April 7th. The Chamber Annual Meeting on April 8th. The Educational Foundation reception on April 12th. And the retirement recognition on May 1st. So for board member reports, sometimes I noticed I caught myself last meeting going out of line here. Ms. Schamberg, have you had any board meetings or any reports from? We have that this week. This week, yes. This meeting, yes.
So I'm up, right? Okay. Well, I just want to thank all the parents and the community members that have been coming and sitting through our meetings because, you know, we're a unified school district and we all work together to make the best possible education for our kids as we can. So I appreciate you guys and everybody online as well. So, yeah, I attended a budget meeting, attended the work session meeting, gave out some You Can Make the Difference awards with Jim, and I got a little tour of South High, and I attended the South Middle Orchestra concert last night.
Thank you. Ms. Cusso.
At the Salina Education Foundation meeting, we approved 2 new scholarship funds. The Eloise Lynch Memorial Scholarship will fund 2 awards each year at Central and South High. We also have 34 grant applications for our regular application window this year. The total ask is $39,930, and that's by teachers and staff who want to do something unique in their classroom. And we have $21,000 available to award. So tomorrow afternoon, we have a long meeting to figure that out. We have LIFT finalists this Friday here in the board office. We have great applications. I meet with them first just to make them feel a little more comfortable, and then we interview them. Board of Control meeting. One of the coolest things, Mr. Hayes has done a lot of cool things. Kudos to you. But you're doing a para academy, and I think that's something we've never done before, and we've been working really hard to make our paras feel valued and make them understand that we really need them. And so he's put together 2 para academies, and I'm really excited that we are offering education for that. Good job.
Ms. Zimmerman.
Yes, I gave a You Make a Difference award at Lakewood to Delia Velasquez Pham, and her students were watching, and her supervising teacher was watching, and it was really fun. I went to this morning's Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge and voted. I want some of those students to work for me. But then there were other students that seemed to say, "Here's my package, and I have no idea how you invent this thing, but I'm going to market it here." So it was interesting to be talking to a lot of them. I went to Equity Council, and we were going to discuss one of the chapters in the Belonging book, but we mostly talked about the bylaws, so it took a lot longer than I think we thought it would, and then the hour was up. I went to meet and confer, which is with the classified staff, and Steve, whose last name I just... Dortzweiler, that's right. And talked about what they might want for the upcoming year and contract, and there weren't too many suggestions for changes. And I was on the calendar committee, which you heard about. Everybody liked the new idea for next year's calendar. Thank you.
Mr. Gardner?
Attended the Head Start or Heartland Budget Committee meeting. Also attended the Heartland Board meeting. So 2 different meetings on the same organization, but the Budget Committee was really interesting. Also went to the meet and confer with Ann. And then I also went and watched South and Central Girls Wrestle, which was educational for me. So it was interesting to see them get out there and show some aggression and the desire to actually get involved and do some things that you really wouldn't typically think of females out there doing. And so one of the things I was really impressed with was I was listening a lot to other participants and other schools talking. And it seems that Central and South have a good reputation in wrestling in a short period of time. And so I didn't say anything, but I was very proud of the reputation that they have across the state for being performers in that particular event. So I was very, very impressed.
Thank you. Dr. Bender?
So Dana spoke already about Salina Education Foundation. I have nothing further to add other than I did attend executive council session. I'd missed the board meeting. It's been a rough month for me. I drove my mother to Wisconsin to attend a family funeral. I got back on Wednesday, and 2 days later, my father died. So I've spent the better part of the month dealing with funeral type things. And as a result, I really can't remember what all I've done, but I know I attended a work session electronically, and that's part of the reason the things we approved Mr. Christie to do earlier are so important. Not only is there a backup from the board to help cover for each other when these life events happen, but without the technology, we miss things. So those things worked very well virtually for me. I did also attend earlier in the month Smoky Hill Education Service Center board meeting. And to the best of my memory, there was nothing revolutionary that happened there. I mean, they're doing a great job. Business is moving forward, but I don't recall any specific events to talk about. That board does meet again day after tomorrow. So perhaps there'll be further things the following month.
Thank you. It seems like writing it down and reporting, there wasn't a lot going on, but it has been a very busy month since our last meeting. We had, of course, our work session where we went through strategic plan with Ms. Schamberger, and I think that was refreshing to me to come back and look at where we've been through the last few years and where we're at and where we're headed. Also got to be a part of the You Make a Difference Award and go into the schools with Ms. Schamberger, and tour South High a little bit and Coronado, and some good times there, and tour some different schools around the state with some of the state events going on. I felt bad not mentioning earlier when the ADs were up here, we had bowling teams at state this week as well. And I don't know off the top of my head how they did, but we've got a lot of great accomplishments going on with students right here in USD 305. So the next thing we have is superintendent's report with Superintendent Exton.
Okay, a few updates. First, we were notified that Melanie Hammond has been selected as a Kansas Master Teacher. And so that is great news. She was here tonight and was recognized as our Teacher of the Year, but she was selected as one of the 7 Kansas Master Teachers. So that's really great for her, and she's a marvelous representative of the quality of teachers that we have in our district. We are continuing work with our building leaders on crisis plans. Most recently, we had a conversation that we did a tabletop exercise that involved our school resource officers to learn about what we should do in an active shooter situation. And as you look at what happened in Olathe this week, it is very sobering to know that could be a real situation and that happens in a place that is so close to home. And being prepared for that is important. And so we will continue to work on our crisis planning, and my thoughts certainly go out to the families that were impacted by that event. This morning, I too went to the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge. That's a combination of work with business leaders, the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, and Salina Area Technical College, and they all helped us with that event. Students had to develop a company and do a pitch to a team of judges. It has kind of a Shark Tank feel, if you've seen the show Shark Tank. And they had to work from finances to marketing to a business plan to projections for business development, and be prepared with both an elevator pitch and a formal presentation. And saw everything from designer discs for disc golf that a student had actually created, a clothing company that a student actually had prototypes and had been selling clothing. In fact, my own daughter has purchased some of that clothing. And so it was fun to hear the pitch that went with that. Bakeries, technology apps, handmade journals with handmade paper, and seeds in the paper. Just beautiful work from the students. So that was really fun for me. I do go to the Kansas, Missouri Superintendent's Forum when the board meeting is over tonight. I'll drive to Kansas City, and I'm on a panel tomorrow morning to discuss our work with belonging through a culture of dignity. And that panel is with the author of the book and several other superintendents that have belonging initiatives happening and dignity initiatives happening in their districts. So I'll be headed there after the meeting tonight. I did want you to know that we recognized Ben Hutton of Hutton Construction with a spotlight letter. He emailed me to acknowledge that one of our biggest challenges is staffing and finding substitutes to keep our classes running. And to help with that issue, he gave his 275 Hutton team members up to 5 paid days off to substitute in schools. So, and I just thought, how just in tune he is with the needs to know, sometimes people don't know how to help, but I just was so incredibly impressed with that gesture and his willingness to help our schools. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is we had a student, a senior at Central High School, Starlette Parham, and she received a RUD scholarship, and that was announced. $80,000 is the value of that scholarship to attend Fort Hays State University. And she plans to study psychology and pre-law. And so it's just really fun to see the success of students from bowling to state basketball that is coming up, to the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge, to students that are honored with scholarships like that. And so I'm just really thankful to be part of that and be able to watch those special events happen in our students' lives.
Thank you, Superintendent Exline. The next item we have is executive session for negotiations. Do we have a time?
I'd say we probably need to do 20.
20? We'll shoot for 20. Okay. If I could have someone give
Mr.
us a
President?
motion. Dr. Bandry.
I move that the Board of Education go into an executive session at 8:45. I see heads nodding, 8:45 for 20 minutes for the purpose of discussing employer-employee negotiations. Because of this matter were discussed in open session and might jeopardize resolution of the negotiation issues, and that the Board of Education reconvene into open session at 9:05 in the board conference room.
Is there a second? Mr. Gardner seconds. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6-0. executive session. We will now be going into our work session, so we will end our live stream at this time.